And we've reached 9 o'clock and started the recording, so you may begin.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all members of the committee and everyone watching us on the live stream this morning. We're glad you're with us. I'll call to order this day 2 of the capital and operating budget meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores. And as I'm sure you'll all recall, we completed our last meeting with 10.6 bridges and culverts under infrastructure and development. So we're going to carry right on now into 10.7, which is the stormwater operating budget. I'll give you all a second to get there if you're not there already, and we'll let Dan catch up here on the screen sharing.
Maybe just a page number, Mr. Mayor, on the binder. Page number.
That I don't have. Dan, can you give us that information?
259, Mike.
259. Yeah.
59.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is everybody caught up? 10.7. So I guess we'll just open it up. Are there any questions or comments with regard to 10.7 stormwater? All we have there is the operating budget. Don't see any questions or comments on that. I'm gonna I'll keep rolling forward here. I get it if you're a little bit behind, so you can always double back if there's I'm going too fast here. But I'll move on to 10.8 winter control. You have your operating budget there. Any questions or comments around the winter control operating budget? I don't see any. So we'll move on to 10.9 streetlights. We have the operating budget, a summary of the 5-year capital forecast, and your capital budget with one item there, the streetlight replacement. Any questions or comments on 10.9 streetlights?
Is that just one? Yeah, is that replacement the part of the Ivings Drive project, or is that separate?
The director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. These are street lights, not traffic signals. So
Okay.
so these ones are just replacing them. This gives us money for one street light through town every year.
I see. Okay, no mistake.
But that's a good segue into our next one, Dave, which is 10.10 traffic control. And we have there an operating budget, a summary of your 5-year capital forecast and your capital budget, and three capital projects on that list. One of which is phase 2 of the Goddard Street and Ivings Drive project. Is there any questions to Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Albert and High Street intersection in Southampton. We have an advanced green going east to west. Would it be possible to have the same going west to east? Sorry, we have it going west to east. I'd like to have it east to west because the traffic coming up from the Ferry Lake has a hard time getting across. You wait for the traffic to turn, and then sometimes, depending on the people there, it would be nice to have it going at the same time. The advanced green.
We'll look at that this year to see if that is something that is warranted. Again, it's the MTO agreement, so we have to do the analysis, engineering, math, and then come back to do that. So we'll do a new traffic count here next year and see what to do.
I understand that, but if you're going one way, it pretty much makes sense that you'd be going the other way as well.
Sounds like they're going to do the review, and we'll get a chance to talk about that later, presuming this item passes through the budget. Any other questions or comments on anything to do with traffic control? I was wondering, Amanda, if you could provide a little more information on the capital project around the Ivings Drive and Goddard Street item. It's a little, it's just a little oblique. I guess it's not entirely clear what you're talking about there. Alignment of driveways, parking layout with site plans. I'm not sure exactly what it means. Could you give a little more detail about what the project is?
Sure. Thank you for the question. On the east side, where the old Little's building, Subway, and Mary Brown's is, there's lane work to be done there to make that flow in and out of those plazas work better for a traffic efficiency piece. So having a common driveway at the lights that would service both those properties, and then making the lanes that are there today, the curb lines line up with the work that was just done will be next year. So that was outside the scope for the work that we got the grant for.
So is this construction on private property then?
There's a little bit just where we can tie in the stuff that's in the right of way, but it's the majority within the boulevard works of our properties or of our property.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amanda, so it makes perfectly good sense to have Mary Brown's and Subway and Little's Furniture Building coming out at the lights. The exit coming out of the existing exit coming out of Mary Brown's and Subway, that would become a right-hand turn only, no longer allowed left-hand turn?
Commissioner, no, we weren't looking at changing the traffic turning at that intersection or at that driveway entrance at all.
So you still will be able to come out of Mary Brown's and the Subway and still try to attempt to cross those 5 lanes, turn left?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
The alternative, of course, is, I mean, I would hope the majority of people come out of the lights, because they can turn right or left of the lights. I'm a little surprised we would still allow people to turn left out of that Subway parking lot and Mary Brown's. Why would you not just go out to the lights and turn left there? I just think that's a hazard there, trying to come out of that parking lot to turn left over five lanes. So I just think we should consider that. That's all, Amanda.
I guess as I sit here and think about it, I just wonder, what is the public interest there? I mean, it seems to me most of the benefit of that project accrues to the private businesses, doesn't it? Like easier traffic flow in and out of your business means more people will go in. I just don't know what the benefit to the public is well, I mean, I guess I can envision some percentage of it in terms of safety on the highway, I suppose, and maybe we would be responsible for some portion of it. But generally, when a business wants to improve its connection to the roadway, the business would pay for that. It would be our responsibility as part of the road reconstruction to return it to it as it was, but prior to construction commencing. But if we're going to make a significant improvement to those businesses' access to the road, why don't the businesses bear some percentage of the cost?
For this one, the driveway at Little's does not line up into the intersection, so people coming in and out would be driving into oncoming traffic from Ivings. So that's why we need to do this work to make the intersection work safely. So then the work to go with that, staff thought this was the opportune time to work with those landowners to make that come in, because we have heard the comment about it's very hard and unsafe, people making left turns out of the Subway Mary Brown. So this we thought would improve that and give that piece of, or give the patrons that option, a safer option out.
And I can understand that we need to make sure Little's continue to have safe access to the road. We can't remove their access to the road. So whatever needs to be done to make sure that driveway exits safely onto Goddard Street, we need to do. But in terms of connecting the neighboring plazas to the streetlights, I mean, there's a huge benefit to them in that, a huge benefit. So I'm just not sure I'm think the taxpayer should pay 100% of the hit on creating that connection. I feel like the property owners should contribute. Maybe maybe that's part of the plan. I don't see it in the budget document. I'm just not sure that I'm comfortable with the taxpayer bearing the whole freight, considering the benefit that will accrue to the bottom lines of those businesses.
I can take that back. Obviously not for today as a suggestion and see what the landowners and staff have discussed and what can be brought forward.
What you don't know what you can't break it out at this point. You don't know what the Littles piece would cost on its own.
That I can find out. I can bring that back to you, but I don't at this time.
I mean, from my perspective, I'd like to put a pause on the thing to know more detail about that breakdown. I don't know what others think, but that's my view. Any other thoughts? Vice Deputy Mayor?
I just think that intersection, Mr. Mayor, with Subway and Mary Brown's and Little's, you know, that's a busy intersection, and I'm pleased to see lights coming out of Little's and Subway and Mary Brown's. I think we should be eliminating the left-hand turn coming out of Mary Brown's Fried Chicken. I said 5 lanes earlier. I erred. It's 4 lanes, but I've come out of there a few times trying to turn left with people peeling through those lights so close to the intersection, and I believe that should be a right-hand turn. If we're allowing a right-hand and left-hand turn coming out of Mary Brown's and Subway Little's in the future with those lights, I don't see why we're allowing a left-hand turn coming out of Mary Brown's. Amanda, you and I had this conversation a week ago about this very topic, and I would really like staff to take a look at and council consider, you know, eliminating the left-hand turn coming out of there. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous left-hand turn coming out of those parking lots.
Any other comments on this one? Well, anyway, I'd like to pull it out and have another look at it. Those are my thoughts. Is there anything further on traffic control 10.10? All righty.
Do we need a motion to pull that out, or?
Well, I mean, if I put it to you, if you want to make that motion, you can.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, if I could, like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, like, why would we pull it out? I guess what you're saying is that pull it out because we don't have enough information that those businesses should be sharing in the cost. Is that the reason for pulling out? Because I think that fixing that intersection complete, it's 90% complete. There's still 10% to go. We need to finish it.
The taxpayers as a whole has put nearly $1 million into that intersection. We've made it pretty good. If the businesses want to access, if businesses that aren't already connected to that intersection want to connect to it, I think they ought to pay for it. And I'd be happy to permit that, but I don't think the taxpayer should be on the hook for another $80,000 so that they can take the benefit to their business of being connected to that intersection.
I'm sure, I think it's around 700 grand, but I think that if it's pulling it out to give us time to see if businesses would contribute, I understand that part, but we have to finish the project. So
yeah, no, I think that
I asked
Amanda to do was to go back and see if she could identify what it would cost to connect Little's furniture, which I think we need to do, which I think we're obligated to do. But beyond that, I think, so I would be willing to pay that cost, but I wouldn't be willing. I think that the private businesses should pay, the neighboring plazas should pay to connect if they want to do that. So I would like to see that cost, the Little's cost, and without the rest. Is there any objection to asking Amanda to come back with that information?
I think it's a good idea. I'd like to have another look at the intersection from the ground and get a feel for it. So I think, yeah, do the Little's part, which would comprise some of the $84,000, and then reconsider the rest of it for public participation.
Did you have a comment, Donnie, the Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been listening to all this. I agree with what you're saying. We should pull this for the moment till we find out. If we just left it as a right turn lane coming out of Subway and Mary Brown's, everybody is just going to go up to the next little intersection and turn, and they're going to be backing traffic up so that they can come back and go south. Ideally, we should be all coming out at the stoplight, but as you said, those businesses are benefiting, so there should be some cost accrued by them. So I like to see that pulled out. If Amanda can get us the costing down to that, then we can go forward with that.
Any objection? Does the treasurer want to make comment? Treasurer?
Yeah. Sorry, maybe I should have spoken just at the beginning of the meeting. Just to update council on the timeline of what we're looking for budget is staff have made the decision that we won't be coming back with a final budget report until January. And so that will allow time for the Director of Infrastructure and Development to update council either when the budget comes back or prior to that, and council can then consider this particular project in the final budget report.
Good, that's good. Any objection to that? I don't see any, so we'll proceed that way then. All right, so anything else on traffic control? If not, we'll move on to wastewater. I don't see any, so we'll go to 10.11 wastewater. There's several items there. You got an operating budget, fees and charges, 5-year capital, and your capital budget, 7 items there. Any questions or comments regarding anything in the wastewater budget? Don't see anything. It's a big budget. I'll give you a sec to have a look at it, make sure.
It goes without saying, Mr. Mayor, sorry,
Yep.
that this is all funded through the water and wastewater charges. Right?
The director or the treasurer, any verification of that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's funded through wastewater reserves.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that this is the second year for us having a significant increase to our wastewater and water fees. I wonder if the director would just, for the sake of the public, quickly review why those 8% and 6% fees are required.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. We have a financial plan for both water and wastewater. The province mandates that the water system be self-sustaining to avoid things like the Walkerton water tragedy again, so that there's always money to be able to handle your operational costs as well as upgrades and accommodating growth. So our plan was redone last year, 2020, and this increase in fees is what we need to get us through the future to be able to sustain the water and the wastewater systems.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Dubinsky.
So my question is, will this, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Amanda. Amanda, does that mean that this 8% increase, this 6% increase is going to happen every year now down the line? Or are we playing catch up and then that fee will reduce eventually?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the hope is that it will reduce back down to 2 or 3, but for the next couple of years, I think it's the next 3 years, we have the 6 and 8. It is part of that financial plan that gets updated every 5 years. So we'll see that review of these rate increases in 2025.
Have you, sir, Councilor Dubinsky.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, and boy, when it comes to this sort of thing, with water and so on, what with the tragedy just down the road in Walkerton several years back, we should spare no expense on safety, and I'm in agreement with these increases. I don't want to pay them personally, but I know it's absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Just for maybe Dan, you've had a look at the BMA results in 2021. Do you have any sense at this point? They report on our comparative rates in water and wastewater with other municipalities. Do you have a sense of how the town of Saugeen Shores stacks up as we make these increases? And we've been making them for a little while now. Any sense of that?
I haven't taken a look in the 2021 study in particular at water and wastewater rates, but I have looked in previous years, and I believe we're middle of the road in terms of our water and wastewater rates. And I'll also add that I know within just within the municipal industry that it's a problem faced by all municipalities, and the Director of Infrastructure and Development and I have spoken about that many communities are facing the same challenges with the costs of providing the infrastructure for water and wastewater. So it's certainly not a unique problem to us, and it's these rate increases I don't believe are unique either.
Yeah, and that's very much been my impression as well, looking at the previous PMA reports, is that the town of Saugeen Shores is very much in line with the rest of the municipalities in Ontario in terms of the cost of water and wastewater services. So I think it's an important service, and we provide a high quality service, and just like all of our neighbors in Ontario do, and I think the public is getting good value for their money on this one, and I think quite frankly they would agree with that. Is there any other comments on wastewater before we move on? I might just ask Amanda, the director. We've had some questions, and they're quite legitimate questions, frankly, from members of the public. Certainly, I've heard them in the last year and before about growth and whether we're keeping up with growth on this infrastructure and on water infrastructure as well. I think the public sees the community expanding quickly and wants to know that we have a handle on that, and that we're doing the work we need to do. So can you, does the 2022 budget, is it keeping it, are we doing the things we need to do to keep up with the rate at which the community is growing? Do you feel comfortable that we do have a handle on making sure that these services are provided at the level we have come to expect them as the community grows?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we did the development charge background study and the water wastewater master plan study well in advance of when we know things are going to be needed. So we keep those up to date, which is great, and helps us with the financing and identifying the projects that are going to come in the future. And those are all related back to growth. So those two studies say we need to expand the water treatment plant when we hit a population of this size. The DC background study has that growth projection figured out so that we can relate it back to what year that's needed in. You'll see the effects of those two studies in this budget analysis. There is a review of the Port Elgin wastewater system starting. There's a study for the expansion of the Southampton drinking water treatment plant. And there's also the works to start implementing the recommendations from the Southampton Class EA that we finished this year as well. So as we're moving forward, we are putting the infrastructure in place ahead of the growth needing it.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else on wastewater? I'll move on maybe to water. Then is 10.12 water, and you have all your budgets there, as well as 7 capital items for your review. Are there questions or comments on the water, specific to the water budget? Just give me a sec to have a look. It's a long one. Don't see. Oh, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, just a quick question for the Xeon membrane modules. Are we actually, it kind of says it, well, I read it twice there. Are we just improving and replacing existing filters, or are we actually adding to banks again?
Through Mr. Mayor, we're doing both. So there's expansion modules that are paid for the development charges, and then we're taking some out and replacing them because as they get used, they start to break down and aren't as efficient.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, really. I was pleased to see the SCADA upgrade because I think with ongoing concerns about cybersecurity and knowing that there have been a few incidents not close by us, but certainly in North America, where this type of system has been interfered with, that I think it's great that we're making sure that our system is as up to date as possible.
Thank you. Further comments on the water budget? I don't see any, so we'll move on then to 10.13, garbage collection. Any questions or comments around garbage collection? Don't see any. I have a comment around it. Dan, do you have the balance that you sent me available between the three service areas, garbage collection, waste management, and recycling? Or can you quote the balance, where we end up when you put all three together?
So not the current reserve balance, but in the budget, what the reserve contribution for this year would be.
Yeah, just how the three of them balance together when you add them up.
Just one moment. Sorry, you might need to come back to me.
I should have asked you in advance. I forgot
No,
all
that's
about
okay.
this now, so I didn't give you much of a heads up. I guess the safe to say that when you factor the three of them together, they produce a pretty significant surplus that rolls into the reserve. And we had a report from the director several weeks ago now about our revenue streams when it comes to these three together, our waste management revenue streams. We have our fixed fee as well as our bag tag fees, and then some suggestions about what financing to put in place going forward. I certainly am in support of increasing the fixed fee, and you folks have heard me speak before about how my view is that we should focus our revenue efforts on the fixed fee and less on bag tag revenues, because I think that that's the more sensible way to collect fees on this, and one that will work out to the benefit of the overall system over time. I don't support the increase to bag tags in 2022. I think we don't need the money in 2022. And if Dan can bring that up, you'll see how that's the case. We're generating a pretty significant surplus already from bag tag revenues, and we're generating a very significant surplus across the system. And Amanda's report shows how over time council will be able to fund the landfill and its future expansion successfully without those increases. I think we're looking at a significant tax increase in 2022. I don't think we need to compound that. We're not under that much pressure to compound that with a bag tag increase in 2022. So my suggestion to council would be that we should reject the idea of increasing bag tags in 2022 and carry on with the fixed fee increase. I would like to see us move forward over time with reducing bag tags more and increasing the fixed fee more. But that's a more complex thing to do. So I can appreciate how we might not want to do that in 2022, but I do think that taking that increase in 2022 is not necessary. Those are my views.
I'll just chime in. I do have that number is 505,000, that the operations of the garbage garbage collection, landfill, and recycling areas are contributing to reserve, but that doesn't include the capital amounts that are coming out of reserve. But in the 2022 budget, it's 500,000, and depending on the results year to year over the past couple of years, that usually has been at least 500,000, and with the goal of saving towards that long-term landfill expansion.
Yeah, and in 2022, the bag tags themselves were up $100,000 in revenues at its current rate, correct?
In 2020 and 2021 in particular, the actual sales of bag tags have been well above historical norms, and we're attributing that mostly to the COVID-19 factor. So yeah, they have jumped. Bag tag revenues themselves have jumped about $100,000 over the last year or two.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I said my piece. I saw a few hands. I saw Councilor Mayette first, I think, and then I'll come to the Deputy Mayor and the Vice Deputy Mayor. Councilor Mayette.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to just agree with you on the bag tag issue, and the reason that I'm against increasing the bag tag fees is it forces people to do more roadside dumping, and we're seeing an increase in that already over by the graveyard in Southampton. The big culvert there gets dumped, and I've noticed an uptake on dumping on the Blind Line and places like that. So if you do it through bag tags, you're just forcing people, or you're encouraging people, I should say, to dump in other ways or burn it or whatever the case may be. So I think fixed fees are a better way to go. Thanks.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I've helped for the last couple of years not to increase the bag tag. We did increase the dumping rate from $5 to $10. And Daniel or Amanda, can you tell us, has there been an increase in the dumping and how much we've made, or how much has been brought in capital-wise with the increase in tippage fees?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to flip to see the 5-year on page 306 for tipping fees. You can see in 2020 we had 816,000, and 2021 as of September we had 555,000. So they're in line with being the same. I'll have to pull up what 2019 looked like in the background here.
Yeah. So
actual.
I'll just comment, if you're referring to the minimum charge at the landfill, that's what the $5 to $10. Yeah. So certainly that will have had an impact, and Amanda's kind of referenced some of the numbers there. The tipping fees in general, though, I would say we'd maybe have to do some more analysis, but I think they're very driven by volumes. Construction volume in particular is a large driver of our overall landfill fees. Those make up a higher percentage of the tipping fees than just the regular minimum charges from households that are coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question and a comment. Daniel, I sent you a few questions last week and asked you about tipping fees, 25 cents. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it about $50,000 that 25 cent per bag tag represents? Is that the correct amount?
Yeah, so approximately 50,000 is what we would expect. So our annual bag tag revenues are approximately 500,000. The 25 cents represents a 12% increase or something like that. So again, very driven by what it means for our volumes of bag tag sales, but 50,000 would be a fair rough number to use.
Yeah. Okay, and I agree, Mr. Mayor. I think we're looking at a fairly hefty increase this year with other demands across our budgets, and this is another form of tax, no doubt. So it's probably not the year to do it. So I support what you're saying.
Any other comments, Councillor Carr?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, back to Daniel, I guess, just to kind of steer back to that other question for the tipping fee increase. I understand what you're saying, that a lot of the revenue there is generated by building construction with the heavier loads. But I think the way I would interpret the minimum fees are the people that are only going in with 4 or 5 bags. You know, it's not a weight thing there. It's a minimum fee. I guess I'm trying to understand that straightly when we were asking for the price increase there. I mean, I think that we probably would have generated more the way I would interpret that. Just, yeah, I don't know if I'm looking at that the wrong way or not, but it just, I had the bigger contractors that are coming in with trailer loads are way over $10 a trip anyways. Yeah, and I understand that, but it was the people that were going in instead of buying bag tags with 2 or 3 bags that were $5 and now they're $10. Am I taking that wrong?
No, that's correct. And certainly that will have an impact on revenues. Yeah, I don't think I disagree with anything there.
Yeah, so but that wasn't tracked. That's kind of the way I took that question. That's where I was trying to get my head around it, I guess.
It's not specific. It's not information that we have right in front of us in terms of the tracking of what so if we look at what's on the screen of, I mean, we'd have to, Amanda, I don't know if you have the numbers from 2019 handy. Actually, sorry, I have them in front of me here. So if we go back to 2016-17, our tipping fees are recorded of, 500, 600,000 per year. And now we see, as shown on the screen, for 2021 and 2022 budgets and the 2020 actuals, that we've gone from 500,000 or 600,000 a few years ago up to 700,000 or 800,000 in tipping fee revenue. And my comment was just to say, we don't have the analysis in front of us that says of that 200,000 in extra revenue, how much of it is from minimum charge increases versus overall construction volume.
Okay, thank you for being clear. Thank you.
May I add to that answer for Councillor Carr?
Yeah,
We do track the volumes, so we know how much is coming in for those items. And I would agree that the $10 tipping or the minimum fee isn't where we're getting the large source of revenue. It's the more expensive or larger loads. And we increased those tipping fees as well. We consciously tripled the unsorted compared to sorted so that we could deter that happening, so that we could separate the wood and the metal better than just having people come construction waste and just dumping it all. So that has helped with that diversion efforts as well. I did also want to know that we aren't seeing a lot of dumping, and we thought that we would when we increased those values. When we put the $10 minimum up, we were scared that that might be a fallout from that. And in the last couple of years, we haven't seen that. We do see the odd mattress kind of thing still here, because that went up to $35, but that's the only thing we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
all right. Any further questions around, around garbage collection? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Amanda. Amanda, are we still finding that the construction dumping is coming in? Is the unsorted still piling up more than the sorted stuff? Are they just coming in and letting it dump?
No, thank you, sir. We do still see a lot of unsorted coming in. I'm not 100% sure if I can say it's all construction. A lot of people, when they're doing the clean out, what we've seen through COVID is all unsorted, because we just bring in our own pickup trucks or minivans full of that stuff. There is an improvement for sure on the wood and metal recycling through the last couple of years. So I do think it has had some effect. I can't say it's 100% compliant, so it still can be cheaper for some people and some loads to dump unsorted.
Okay. My only recommendation, Mr. Mayor, would be that if we're going to do any increase, will be to the unsorted pile. You make it, you got to pay for it.
Sure, so that'll appear under the waste management fees and charges, so we can talk about that in the next section if you want. Just one more from me before we leave garbage collection. I just wondered to the treasurer, did you, so right now, I assume that you adjusted following our last meeting, the waste management fixed fee percentage increase upwards to along with the rest of the charges? And what percentage did you, if you did that, what percentage did you choose?
So just a general comment on fees and charges is that we chose 4.5% to all of the base fees and charges increases. The process on that will be that at the December 13th council meeting, staff will bring back proposed fees and charges bylaw that shows the 4.5% throughout all of these areas. And with some of the budget summaries that you'll see later, you'll see some of the impact, particularly in the tax funded areas. So there hasn't been a lot that I've done in terms of analysis within our user fee funded areas, such as waste management. And I was not going to increase the waste management fixed fee by the 4.5%, although I certainly can with council's direction. The bag tag fee and fixed fee were presented as part of an overall plan to fund landfill expansion over time. And so I didn't interpret that 4.5% in that way, but based on council's discussion and comments here, I think what staff would like to hear from council on is the overall funding strategy for waste management, garbage collection, and recycling as a whole. And so if council would like to propose a particular increase to the waste management fixed fee or a particular change to the bag tag fees, then we can make that whatever council's direction is.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Daniel, just a follow up to that then. So for option 5, that was in the report, the September 13th report, which is taking basically essentially doubling the levy by 2031. Can you estimate what the yearly or the annual percentage increase would be to reach that doubling by 2031?
It'd be roughly 9 or 10%
per year.
Per year. Yeah.
Okay. So if we're talking about 4.5%, then that would not be. Which one of those options would that fit into then?
Yeah. It would, so the 3 or 4.5%, and if Mayor Charbonneau, if you'd like, I can pull up the report from September 13th that shows those options.
Sure.
So the proposed increase that's in the budget is likely more along the lines of option 2. Although it's a combination of options, I guess. The purpose of the September 13th report was to show, I mean, it's somewhat intuitive, but the larger increases we see both to the fixed fee and on bag tags, the higher that 2031 reserve balance ends up being. I guess I'd caution that although staff stand behind the numbers in this report, a lot of inputs can change over time. So the report outlined $10 million as the cost of the landfill expansion project. We know that over the course of planning for a 10-year project is going to be full of estimates and changes to input costs and revenues and all of those all of those inputs. So yeah, I wouldn't say that staff have proposed a particular option within the budget. These were options that were presented to council. If council wants to choose one of those 5 options, then staff are able to implement one of those 5 options. If council wants to use those 5 options as a reference point for decisions around percentage increases to either bag tags or the fixed fee, then council has that option as well. Staff certainly recommend putting more away into the landfill expansion reserve sooner. It will mitigate future increases. It will allow staff to plan for the project better by creating a better base amount within the reserve sooner. And so, but the recommendation in front of council is the 3% to the fixed fee and the $2.25 to the bag tags. That's the recommendation that's in front of council in terms of the budget.
Any other questions or comments? I think we need to give some direction to staff on this one at this point. I think that, obviously, and I've stated it several times, my preference is if you go back there, Dan, whatever option it was, option 6 or whatever, to essentially increase the fixed fee and eliminate that first bag tag. I think that's the best approach, but I'm not going to propose that today. I think my suggestion would be that we freeze bag tags at the 2021 rate and that we increase the fixed fee by a rate closer to the rate of inflation, potentially that 4.5% that Dan has proposed across the rest of the budget. That would be my suggestion. If someone can move that or come up with their own suggestion. Any thoughts?
Mr.
Councilor Grace and then Councilor Matt.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, but so the option 5, which is I think the closest version on that from that September 13th report, with keeping the bag tag price the same at 2 and doubling the levy to increase to 110 by 2031, that gives us 12.6 million in the reserve by 2031. If we're not, and Daniel said that would be about a 9% annual increase. So Daniel, do you think that leaves us, if we just do 4.5% or 4.9%, would that leave us with about 10 million in the reserve? Is it possible for you to eyeball that?
I could try, but I wouldn't want to quote a particular council or a number to council. I will say that a 4.5-5% increase, the fixed fee in particular provides stable revenues over the long term, and so a particular increase there begins to set us up for success later. I guess I'll just leave it. I don't know the exact number that would leave in the reserve, and I wouldn't want council to focus on a particular number. So within option 5, it quoted 12.6 million in the reserve if the fixed fee was doubled over time. I wouldn't want council to get caught up on whether that number is 12.6 million or 11 million. I'll just say that in order to double it and guarantee that we would be meeting the project funding, I do believe that the number I quoted of 9% or something like that would be the way to do that. But a 5% increase as well certainly provides that stable funding that would put us on that path.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would go ahead with the option 5 version, but at the rate of inflation or around there, because I think that makes sense. People understand that you've got to keep up with the inflation rate. So I think that makes sense. And I would support some version of option 5, and we can always come back and adjust that another year if we have to.
All right. Is there a resolution in there somewhere? And if you want to propose that formally, then Councilor Grace, that we fix the fee at the 2021 rate and increase the fixed fee at 4.5%.
Yeah, the director has her hand up, so I wonder if she wants to.
I just wanted to get the resolution on the floor if it's
yes,
possible.
I would move that.
Is there a seconder for that?
I would second that.
Councilor Mayette seconds. Okay, well, so it is on the floor. Let's hear from the director.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that the doubling isn't a slow increase, that in the math that I did, it would be starting in 2022 or 2023 that we would double and have the 110 going in with the no bag tags in that option. So it would be for the next 8 years, we would be collecting it at 110 per household.
Councilor Grace?
Okay, but that's with a free bag tag.
Yeah.
Which was not what I was looking at, the keeping the bag tag price consistent, option 5.
That's what I understood too.
Yeah, the free bag tag one gets you to 9 million, as I recall, and the one with, if you double and maintain, it's 12 and change, I think.
Correct. And they both have that 110 starting not in 2031, but almost immediately. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I apologize for not making that that clear, that doubling was immediate in the report. But just if I kind of think, if I can contextualize this for council, you can see that the status quo has a projected 2031 reserve balance of 7.3 million. So that's a fixed fee remaining the same and bag tags remaining the same. The immediate doubling with bag tags the same provides 12.6 million. So if we look at a situation where over time, if by 2025 or 2026, we were at a mid-range of a fixed fee of $80 or so, that's where I think you'd see an approximate $10 million reserve balance. So I think we're hearing from council that this that the option of fixing the bag tag fees and raises to the fixed fee are the path that they'd like to go forward, at least for now. And so if that helps contextualize that, kind of, we're maybe splitting the difference between the 7.3 million and the 12.6 million.
Yeah.
Councilor Grace?
Just to clarify, I did not understand that immediate jump to 110. My motion would be a gradual 4.5, starting with about a 4.5 or 4.9% increase this year to the tax levy, or the levy.
So the resolution I have on the floor at the moment is that we fix the fee at the bag tags of 2021, and then we increase the fixed fee at 4.5% in 2022. I'm
Yes.
seeing the mover nod, and Dave seconded that. So that's what we have on the floor. Is there any discussion to that particular resolution? I don't see any. All in favor of that? That's carried. Okay. So why don't we move on then to 10.14, waste management. You have your operating fees and charges and 3 capital items there. Any questions or comments to that item 10.14? Did you want to, the Deputy Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if this is the spot, but when in looking at the landfill expansion Class EA studies, are we fixed on landfill, traditional style, or will we be considering an incinerator at some point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation from the Class CA is landfill expansion and diversion, and that's the path we will move forward on unless directed by council to start investigating incineration. The incineration was investigated as part of that Class EA and determined that the cost is prohibitive because we aren't large enough to sustain it.
But when you did that study, did you take into account the neighboring municipalities who will be looking to go green as well? And I think we need to be moving this. You throw a turbine on, and as you're burning, you're creating energy. So it's a win-win. You're paying to take people are paying us to take their garbage, and we're producing energy at the same time.
I think so this is a We do have the report that we did, and we also had the report through the MIC, which was done in collaboration with our partners across the region. I think there's going to be increasing discussion around waste management, particularly around organics diversion. I think that probably will be the first area we talk about with our neighbors, but potentially other areas. And I think it's also important for context to remember that this whole landscape is going to change significantly in the next few years as the circular economy comes into effect as enforced by the province, with new players, private sector players, increased diversion, and the producer pay model coming into effect. So I think, I think it would be, from my own perspective, a mistake to make too many changes to what we're doing today until we better understand the landscape what the landscape's going to look like over the next few years. I think status quo for now is the right move, and work with our neighbors on all of those things, because when it comes to this, we're small players and we need to work in a bigger collective to make sure we manage this right and that our taxpayers get the best deal. So, I mean, that's my outlook on it. And certainly I think that's in line with what we've heard in terms of recommendations from our staff and through the reports we've done in the last couple of years.
I just was wondering, Mr. Mayor, as we're looking to moving forward, I think the old traditional ways of garbage dumping need to be reassessed, and environmentally sensitive and caring ways need to be done. But again, we can hold on to this, and as you said, the climate and the whole thing is in flux and it'll be changing, so we can discuss this at a later date. Thank you.
We're wise to continue to reserve these funds. We call them landfill expansion funds now, and keep planning for the landfill expansion. But if the landscape changes in the next little while, we'll have funds and we can send them in different directions if we think that's appropriate, or future councils do. So anything else on waste management at this point? Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I guess to Amanda, and Amanda, I don't mean to catch you unaware here, but it's a simple question. We have the expansion EA studies going on, and in 2022, we're looking at $250,000 being spent, and then $100,000 for the next 4 years. Can that $250,000 be bumped to a later year, and this year spend $100,000 and perhaps help our bottom line tax increase, or are we sort of stuck with the $250,000 right now?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The scheduling of these studies is to get in line to have the landfill constructed before we need it. So we know that there's about 12 years left in the landfill, and working back from that date for construction to be completed, we need to have the pre-engineering studies done in 2021, 2022. So these are the archaeological, the natural environment pieces, those groundwater tests. Those are, we're trying to site the expansion cells properly. And if we delay it a year, it just means that we're 1 year tighter to the landfill being full and us being constructed.
Well, Mr. Mayor, then the $100,000 charges we have budgeted from 2023 to 2026, what are those?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those are continuing of it. So after we do these engineering studies, then we need to look at the sites within the property for the expansion, site it, design it, and get it ready for construction. So these are the engineering studies that will lead up to what the footprint will look like when we go to build it.
Okay, so we're stuck with the $250,000 for next year.
Yeah. It's also important to note that $250,000 is funded from the landfill expansion reserve and not from the tax levy. So those reserves that we're funding, that we were just talking about building, that's how we're paying for all of this. So even if you were to cut it, it wouldn't change the levy situation.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on waste management? I don't see any. So why don't we go on to the final one in our the waste category, recycling. Are there any questions or comments around 10.15 recycling? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for the director, and maybe it's included somehow, but I know that over the last, well, since 2019 and then last, I guess at the end of 2020, we introduced the film plastic collection and the styrofoam recycling programs, which have been, I think, very successful in terms of public use. I didn't see those listed in particular. Have the prices for delivery of those programs remained the same? And if so, what are they, or how much of that recycling budget would be comprised of those two areas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just because of how our general ledger numbers work, those are included in diversion under landfill. So on page 306, there, if you look at the line 64504900, waste diversion and calendars, the money is in that line item for there. So you'll see the 2020 was 1,400 and now we're at 27, and that is the cost of increasing that for the film plastics, and that they are so well used that we've doubled the collection from those, and we've added more bins. So I'm happy to have that as an increased level of service and expense through that budget item there.
And just I believe that and I don't know if this has changed, but it maybe, I'm thinking 6 months ago or something, you came to us with a report indicating that originally we had hoped that 7,500 kilograms per year would be diverted just from the film plastics program. And now, and I don't know, maybe it was 6 months or a year ago, it had increased to almost 16,000 kilograms. Is that still about the same, or has that increased?
The diversion is the same. We're still same number of bins and same amount that we're hauling away.
Okay, well, I'd just like to thank members of the public who are using this program so enthusiastically, and thank the director and Mr. Saunders for being so innovative and introducing this.
Very good, thank you. Further questions or comments around 10.15 recycling? I don't see any. So we will move on then to 10.16 cemetery operating fees and charges, and a couple of capital items. Any questions or comments around the cemetery 10.16? Don't see any. So that then moves on. The next two are really information items. Not much decision making can be made on them, but there's we can take any questions or comments, and they would largely be directed to our representatives on those boards. We start with 10.17, Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. Council had a chance to look at that too on its, I think its last agenda, or the one before. Don't see any on that one. How about 10.18, Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit? Don't see any comments there. Just for clarity, Daniel, so on the smart one, you have that there, but you have that in the budget at the same rate as last year, and you've presented the increase as a service level enhancement that's not in the budget.
That's correct.
But I mean, we can't. It's not option. If we want to stay in the smart program, we have to fund it, right?
Yeah, the format of doing that, just for council's information, just came about a couple of years ago, where generally requests from outside organizations or organizations in which Saugeen Shores has a partial ownership of, we've just presented as additional items, but we can maybe look at that going forward due to the lack of control that council has over those issues.
Yeah, I think on one like this, it would be wise to work it into the overall budget unless council's deciding to pull itself out of SMART. I think that's, it's a decision we have to make on this one. So I'd like to, with council's consent, can we bump the item from the list below, Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit, up into this discussion? It's an additional $30,000 net impact from tax levy, taking the contribution up to $146,384. We'll have to do it by resolution. It's not in the main body of the budget, but I guess I'd look for direction from council on that one while we're discussing this. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, council's aware I'm the council rep on Smart Mobility as a past president, and the budget has pretty much been approved. Should see it in the next week. Daniel, you're looking at around $15,000 is my understanding, but we can get that number verified in the next few days.
Okay, yeah, that's how I was gonna ask for you to confirm the final number. The number that's in the package is from a few weeks, maybe a month ago.
That's right, and the budget, the board did not like the budget. We felt majority of the board felt the increase was too steep, and they've asked the manager to come back with a revision, which he did at our meeting a week or two ago, and it's closer to the $15,000 mark. But we can get that number verified in the next few days.
All right, so it sounds like there's unclarity on the number. Can we look for direction from council to the administration to incorporate into the budget the funding as requested by Saugeen Mobility and Regional?
I'd like to make that a motion, Mr. Mayor, for sure. Absolutely.
Right, so that's moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Grace. Is there any discussion about that? No, then all in favor? That's carried. So that takes one off the next list anyway, Dan. There you go. We're down to 15 items rather than 16. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the budget as presented by the administration. I may turn it over now to the treasurer to give us a bit of a recap on decisions we have made with regard to what we've heard in the last 2 days, or decisions we need to make. What I'd like us to do, just to give you some sense of how I would like us to proceed, and of course it's your show, so if you want to do it differently, we can. But what I am thinking is that we will deal with all the things we've discussed in the last couple of days now, straighten out where we're at, get a report from Daniel about where we have landed, and then we can consider these items that are not in the budget. That'll give us a bit of a foundation on which to build. We know where we're at, and we can know where we're going as we make these decisions on these remaining 15 items. Is that acceptable to everyone? Yeah. Okay, so Daniel, why don't you give us that, give us a recap and tell us where we're at, and tell us what decisions council still has outstanding on what we've heard so far.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll share my screen again with another document that is the summary of changes, and we'll start from that point. The 2022 budget, so hopefully everyone can see that screen.
Yep.
So at the top of the screen, I'll just walk through this document and hopefully make it clear for council. Again, I apologize, it's not doesn't look overly fancy. The original total tax levy that's in the base budget, it was $19,323,543. I have multiple sections here of changes and updates. So this first section is corrections and new information that have been brought forward by staff. So it includes the Saugeen Valley revised number, which was $21,336 higher than what was originally built into the base budget. As identified in the previous council session, there were errors within the budget. 7,500 for bike friendly was listed twice. Staff underestimated tree sale revenue by 15,000. And just this past week, we received notice from MPAC of additional assessment on our tourist camp. And unfortunately, we had built in, because it was built into our tax roll, we did project the revenue within the base budget from this item, but we're not made aware of the actual assessment to our property from MPAC until last week. So those are all tax levy items. And I'll just clarify for the mayor's benefit that there was also discussion last week on the NWMO reserve, and the reserve listing that council saw as part of the original budget did list $30,000 coming out of the NWMO reserve. That was listed in error, and so the NWMO reserve in the base budget was not touched, did not have any ins or outs from it. So I apologize for that. I've also listed in this next section items from council comments that we received during the first session. So the changes to the fees and charges, increasing most base fees from 2.5% to 4.5%, was a total change of 41,000. 10,000 of that increased revenue was within tax funded. Well, it was all within tax funded areas. But 31,000 are attributable to the harbor and tourist camp. And again, based on council's comments and staff's recommendation, it's proposed that the 31,000 attributable to the tourist camp and harbor go back to the tourist camp and harbor reserves. And so you see that amount listed in the other reserve column. Staff have added a capital project for fire equipment, an SCBA fill station at Station 50. And increase is to a fire reserve meant for ongoing capital needs of the fire department. There was also a proposed change just between funding from future capital reserve and legacy reserve to combine the municipal office modernization with the aquatic facility planning amount that's coming out of legacy reserve. And finally, there was a suggestion to defer the Moore Bridge EA to 2023, and that had $60,000 of tax levy funding in the base budget. So all of those changes, both corrections and items that council had commented on, result in essentially no change, just an $836 change to the base tax levy. And so all of the percentages, both the blended and municipal that we spoke to in the first budget session, remain true with all of those changes. And then lower in the sheet, we'll see I've listed all of the additional items for council's consideration. And I may as well show at this point just the total impacts. If all of those changes were approved, you can see that we have quite significant changes in the tax rate. And it would mean that our future capital reserve balance is lowered from approximately 1.5 million down to just under 500,000. And the final item that I want to speak to that I've shown in this summary is Osif funding. We did receive news through the province's fall economic statement that the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, the total funding envelope will be doubled in 2022, although we have not received an allocation notice that indicates what that impact will be to the town of Saugeen Shores. It is a possibility that we will receive an additional 800,000 or so in Osif funding. And Osif funding is meant for core infrastructure, so roads, bridges, water, and wastewater.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So can we can you just bring that back up, Dan? Would you mind?
Yep.
I just, so one thing before we go on, I just would like council to give its stamp of approval or not to those, to what's above the line there. So there was some changes in the, there's changes in, several changes that were suggested and discussed, but not really voted on by council in our last session. So you've got the fees and charges increases, a couple of new capital items from the fire department, and the Moore Bridge, plus all of the corrections, which are really not optional, but are there. I just wonder if, just to set a baseline, make sure we're all in agreement on the baseline, can we get council to, just by resolution, approve what's above the line there? I don't know exactly how to word that, but to approve the change, we'll say a resolution to approve the changes made to this moment in the budget to arrive at that 19,324,379 tax levy. Is there a mover and seconder to do that, or just Councilor Mayette, Councilor, or the Deputy Mayor, you making that, or you have a question? So it's moved and seconded. I can move by the Deputy Mayor, moved by Councilor Mayette, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and we approve those items above the line. All right, yeah. So is there discussion, the Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've got the acting Chief Johnson on when he was mentioning the scuba filling station in the 26 projection, it was 75. And I know he was talking with our friends Saugeen First Nations. Is 40,000 enough to cover that filling station now?
Yes, we should have enough funds to get the new fill station here at Station 50.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the resolution before us? Everyone's clear on what I'm talking about in that resolution? Yes? All right, so all in favor of that? That's carried. Okay, so that's our baseline now, and we're all in agreement on that. Was there any other discussion before we break into the rest of the items? Are there any other discussion about what we've heard to date, or other thoughts? I think the OCIF information is interesting and something we can think about. The other question I had, Dan, was around, you gave us a report at our November, second meeting in November about projected surpluses and a transfer that will likely come once we get the year-end financial statements into the tax stabilization reserve. Can you just remind us what your estimate was in that report?
So the main impact of that report, or the main findings of our third quarter operating results, was that our supplemental taxation came in at a very healthy number of 410,000 versus a budget of 150,000. And also that staff had found that our total labor costs were approximately 225,000 below budget. So those two items combined would indicate that we may be looking at a surplus at year end in the range of 400,000 to 500,000. That could be transferred to tax stabilization reserve or to future capital reserve.
So it's possible that council could choose to draw, I mean, the purpose of the tax stabilization reserve is to stabilize the taxes. So it is possible that council could draw some amount of money from the tax stabilization reserve in 2022. Obviously, we would not want to come close to topping that number out, but some of those funds could be made available to fund certain priorities of councils or to reduce the tax levy in 2022. Is that safe to say, Daniel?
I think that's correct. And I'll also just mention on the Osif funding, because the amount is not not known as a final number. Staff's recommendation to council around the potential OSIF funding is that in the final budget report, staff would, if there was additional OSIF funding, use it to fund projects within core infrastructure that within the base budget are being funded from future capital reserve. So using those somewhat interchangeably in the final budget report.
Alternatively, though, sorry, I said there just one comment. Alternatively, we could use it to offset tax financed capital projects in core infrastructure, freeing up tax levy to fund other priorities.
That could be done. The current capital taxation level is approximately 2% above 2021's level, and it is an important funding source for our ongoing and long-term capital, that portion of the capital levy or tax levy that we use for capital.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we would cut tax funded capital. What I'm suggesting is tax funded capital could be, with that $800,000, we could fund other capital projects through the tax levy, additional capital projects.
Correct. Yeah, council could certainly choose to use that as a way of increasing the number of projects within core infrastructure.
This is all just to set a bit of a baseline for the discussion we're about to have. All right, I saw the Vice Deputy Mayor. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no, you answered one of my questions. And it was about OSIF funding and helping to fund tax-funded capital projects. So that's been answered. I appreciate that. Daniel, the future capital reserve budget balance, if we could have that number again from the future capital reserve, and after we have funded potentially funded projects for 2022, and secondly, the present balance in the tax stabilization reserve, excluding year-end projected surplus of $400,000 or $500,000. What's that balance?
So the current projected year-end balance of the tax stabilization reserve is $54,851. And the future capital reserve projection at the end of 2022, given the base budget, is $1,484,806.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Daniel, based on our existing policy, where would we want the tax stabilization reserve to sit? Where would we want it to end up to meet our existing policy?
Our existing policy calls for a maximum in the tax stabilization reserve of 2% of that year's taxation level. So if I do a quick calculation on the proposed 2022 taxation level and do 2% of that, it would give a tax stabilization balance of $386,000.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else need any clarification or anything before we go into item 11? Let's see. So why don't we let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 10. Let's come back at 10:30. Okay.
I'm in again, yeah. Yeah, I'm in again.
It's 10:30. If we can get all members to turn their cameras back on and staff. Okay, one additional call for council members to turn their cameras back on. Mr. Mayor, we have all council members returned to the meeting. You may begin.
Linda. All right, so now we're on to item 11, service level enhancements and request not in budget, pages 325 to 354 and 11.1. Additional items not in the budget. So what I would propose we do, so I can see you all here. What I would propose that we do is work through these one at a time. If you are interested in supporting the item, bringing it forward for council to approve having it added to the budget, I would request that you suggest a funding source as you do that, and Daniel will follow along and add this up as we go along, and we'll attempt to make our way through the list. So the first item then is, you have a question before we start?
I did, Mr. Mayor. I just, the starting point. So right now we're around 4.8% blended tax rate increase. Is that correct? And secondly, at what point do we make a decision on, potentially using funds from the tax stabilization reserve? I've heard earlier that there's about $550,000 balance left at the end of the year, with $386,000 needs to be maintained as the base amount. So it leaves about $175,000. At what point do we talk about lowering the tax rate using things like Osif, like if we can lower the tax rate with Osif, maybe we can't, but with the tax stabilization reserve, because to add to this 4.8, for me, it's going to be difficult to prove any of these without at least allocating to to tax levy. So at what point do we talk about that, Mr. Mayor, of lowering the 4.8 using tax stabilization?
So to be clear, what I'm suggesting is that we go through these one by one, and that if you want bring it forward, you propose a funding source. So for example, I'll put this one out here because what I'm thinking about, say you're thinking about the Saugeen Beach Road rehabilitation. That's a piece of core infrastructure. You could potentially say, I like to move forward with the Saugeen Beach Road rehabilitation and fund it using the OCIF funds.
Okay.
Or you could say 12, I don't know, the Cultural and Heritage Master Plan. I want to fund that. I know I can't use OCIF, so I'd like to offset this other capital project that's funded by tax somewhere else in the budget and transfer those tax levy dollars to fund the Cultural and Heritage Master Plan.
Okay.
Or, so these are the options, or I'd like to fund it through the tax stabilization reserve. So I think, and then Dan will add all those decisions up. We'll make them one at a time and we'll see where we end up.
Right.
Hopefully we can be cognizant as we go through of what the impact is that we're having. And then we may have to, we'll decide if we're happy with the levy increase we end up with, and if we're not, figure out how to resolve it.
Understood. That helps clarify. Thank you.
Okay. I saw that the treasurer have a question about that.
Just a couple of quick comments on the first one around trying to remove using tax stabilization or other reserves to try to reduce the tax rate. I'll just comment that staff have done that process as part of the base budget in trying to identify projects and one-time operating expenses and things of that nature to get to the tax rate that is presented. And so I'd just like council to make sure that council's aware that there is already $170,000 coming out of future capital reserve that covers what I would deem core infrastructure or core operating spending. And so I'd just like council to keep in mind whether what they're trying to fund is core operating spending or a one-time expense. And my second comment around the OSIF funding is I'd like for at least at the end of the session for it to be clear to staff if for some reason OSIF funding did not come in double, is it council's intention to remove the project from the budget or to utilize future capital reserve and still move forward with the project?
I think we should state that right up front. If council decides to fund a capital project through OCIF, through the additional OCIF, then it's possible that project will not proceed. If the OCIF doesn't come through, it would be contingent on receiving OCIF and would not be funded through any other source. So I think council should, unless there's some disagreement with that, I think that's how that's the understanding we should proceed on, because we may not get that money. Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would prefer to see if we're going to recommend certain projects to be funded through OCIF, that we bin those projects and decide on them individually once we know the amount of OCIF funding increase, and at a subsequent meeting, presumably in January before the final budget is approved, that we have another look at those again and make them fit within the envelope that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I think that's sort of reset. I think you're saying the same thing I am. We'll put the money, we would decide to fund a project through OCIF at this moment. And then once we understand the OCIF situation, we'll know whether the project's going to proceed or not, and we can always discuss it again. But I think we just have to have the understanding today that if we're going to do that, that we may not have a funding source if that OCIF doesn't come through. And so we would have to make a different decision. But I think we're on the same page. The deputy mayor had his hand up earlier. Sorry, Donnie, did you have a comment? I'm
just ready to start on number one when you're ready, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, good enough. I just want to make sure everybody is clear on all these things because it's a little complex, and I want everybody to know what what we're doing here and the impacts we're having. But let's work our way through. I think the Deputy Mayor's right. So let's start with the first one then, 12-month ice at the community complex. Comments? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 years ago, council approved year-round ice. COVID kind of threw a wrench into that. I understand the need to get this out there in advance, and we are getting into December, so it's hard to get the groups in. What I am proposing is that we move the 12-month ice to next year, but that the town, the municipality has ice in at the Plex starting August 1st. That will then allow our new director of community services and operations a chance to realign, because $50,000 to bring somebody in from cutting grass, in my opinion, is crazy. And with the new realignment, there might be some savings to put in there. But that will give us a year to plan and get it out there. I know there's a young lady who plays on the Canadian Women Nationals hockey team who would like to come up here and run a hockey school. And there are several other groups that would like to run hockey schools and skating schools. And I know the figure skating club would be itching to run later in the year. So it's timing. So I would suggest that we move this to next year, but that we guarantee that our ice is up and running for the 1st of August this year.
Okay, do we have, is there any comment, or does the administration have any sense of what the Deputy Mayor is proposing, what that would cost?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can definitely take a look at those costs. I'm not 100% familiar with when the exact start date is historically been set for having the ice in the complex, but yeah, we can take a look at the cost for doing that. But in terms of the 12-month ice, I think there is a requirement or consideration should be given to reevaluating that based on a number of factors that have come into place since the initial concept was approved by council.
So can we proceed this way then, that we don't proceed with the 12-month ice as is recommended in this item 1 report, but that we ask staff to come back with information at our next budget session about the cost for advancing ice in the facility, in the Plex, to the 1st of August. Is that agreeable to everyone? Yes. Okay. And you and Steve, you're clear on that, and that makes sense?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. So the item 1 will not proceed. Item 2 then, capital sidewalk program. Any comments with that one?
I'd like to suggest this is one that could be targeted towards Osif funding if it qualifies. We are falling, I believe anyways, and speaking to staff, that we're falling further and further behind with new sidewalks. I think there are areas, particularly traffic moving over to, secondary school, to grade 8 school along Arlington Street. I think that there's a new section was put in there last year, and it'd be nice to see that program continue so that there is a continuation of sidewalk right through to the high school. We leave it to staff to decide where they feel, best needed sidewalk replacement, but I'd like to see that one move forward. And hearing news of Osif potentially being able to fund this kind of thing, that would be one I would support.
So, a question to the treasurer or to the director of infrastructure and development: would this project qualify for OCIF funding?
I believe it would, Mr. Mayor, because capital sidewalks are part of our core infrastructure in the asset management plan.
Very good. So you have a proposal from the Vice Deputy Mayor to fund the capital sidewalk program in the amount of $32,500 from the OCIF funding, should that funding come through from the province. I'll consider that a motion from the Vice Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder for the motion? Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion to that item? Don't see any. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, then that moves us to item 3, Chantry Center funding. I'll kick this one off. I think we should fund it $3,500. Does anybody want to make that motion? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, second by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion on that? Don't see any. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, that moves us then on to Sorry, item 4, the Cultural Heritage Master Plan discussion. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's something that Councillor Grace and I presented to Council, I think 4 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 2 years ago, and last year. I know that 2 years ago, we as a council decided to delay a Culture and Heritage Master Plan in view of the fact that Bruce County was carrying out a cultural master plan, a heritage master plan, and so council decided to defer it till such time Bruce County had it completed, and it is complete. And it's a tough year, obviously, to fund from tax levy when we're at the position we're in today, right now. But at bare minimum, and there may be other comments from council may want to see it actually happen in 2022. I'd like to see it happen. I have a couple of suggestions. At bare minimum, staff to probably formulate the terms of reference, at least go that far, review what the county plan reads, meet with county staff, draft up terms of reference for the writing of a culture and heritage master plan, and be ready to go for 2023 and next year's budget. And the second option, I guess I would ask staff to, consider is taking a look at grants from other sources. Provinces have been coming out with some funding for new initiatives lately, and perhaps the culture and heritage master plan may fit in nicely to one of the criteria from a provincial funded program. The third option, I guess, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned earlier was, can something be removed from capital funded by Osif and slide this one into the budget under capital for consulting services. So there's three options there. I don't know which one maybe other council members might chime in on what I'm asking for there, suggesting. But that would be my starting point, as some recommendations.
Okay, any other comments? Councilor Grace?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. As the Vice Deputy Mayor said, we've talked about creating a plan like for this during budget time for at least the last, I think, 4 years, and every year we've been asked to defer, and so we have. I think this is the right year to move forward with something. I'm interested in the Vice Deputy Mayor's suggestions about taking some initial steps. 10,000 of this funding in this proposal is suggested to come from the planning reserve. But here are the reasons why I think it's important that we get started on this. During our official plan review public consultation, the public identified cultural heritage and placemaking as one of its top 3 priorities, along with housing and along with natural environment. As this particular summary points out, this will serve as a community development tool for planning and to make recommendations to update our official plan, which is ongoing. Basically, what I would say is that there are reasons why this is really important, practical reasons. The lives of our residents and our visitors are enhanced by the richness of our cultural heritage, whether it's in the charm of our heritage buildings and structures or by cultural features such as performing and visual arts, sports, religious, educational, and historical institutions, libraries, and our volunteer organizations. In 2019, we saw our community come together in a remarkable and united way to win the Lamont Sports Park Project Play Grand Prize of $250,000. I consider this to be part of our cultural heritage. And we're planning on investing millions of dollars in the next few years to create places which will help our citizens enrich their lives through community cohesion, through sports, the Southampton Town Hall. A cultural and heritage master plan will help our staff to ensure that our investment is being used as wisely as possible. And finally, protecting and supporting our cultural heritage is an investment in our economy. People choose our community to come here to live, to start up their businesses, to come as tourists, in large part because of the cultural heritage features we offer, our community character, a culturally rich lifestyle. And I think having a strong and defined cultural heritage master plan will help us to protect those investments and attract even more. So I like the Vice Deputy Mayor's suggestion of getting started on this at least this year with the $10,000 from the planning reserve, and then being ready to go with a more tangible plan in 2023. The other thing I was wondering about is I just looked at on page 61, the office furniture. We have $11,000 allocated towards that from the tax levy, if that would help. I just, I wonder how compelling our need for office furniture it is. Maybe it is, but I wonder if somebody could say something about, is that something we could divert towards this as opposed to spending $11,000 from the tax levy on office furniture next year?
Oh, I'll comment on that if that's all right. The tax for or the office furniture line is a standard line that's in every year because there is a need to replenish furniture and other fixtures throughout our buildings. We have a lot of buildings. It's mainly for the municipal office, but it can be used for other buildings as well. So I do view it as an important project, to just that annual component to it. But I will mention that because this is, my understanding would be this is proposed as a one-time project, that any reserve funding could be used. But I'll let other staff maybe comment on the project itself and what costs may be actually kind of due in 2022 if this were to move forward.
Thank
I
you.
wonder if the CAO could comment about, if we were to put $10,000 toward this project in 2022, would that be an amount of money that would be usable? I mean, could you do anything with $10,000? What could you do with it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. My mind is kind of spinning here, trying to think about how to problem solve this as well. I think the first place we need to do, as the Vice Deputy Mayor referenced, is take a look at the outcomes from Bruce County's study and where it's at and how specific it got. I haven't had a chance to review that personally myself yet. I know that one of the next steps they're looking at is creating the accompanying archaeological maps, which will be really significant in Saugeen Shores. And I know that they've asked for support from our supervisor of planning and also from our chief building official to help with that map creation. So I know that piece is moving forward. I'd like to sink my teeth into it a little bit further to understand it. Hearing Councillor Grace's suggestion of, at a minimum, bringing forward the $10,000, I think that is something that we could at least get the ball rolling in 2022 with, and come back to council with more detailed plans for 2023 budget consideration.
Okay, so there you go. Is there, Councilor Maya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of council. In concept, I support the formation of a cultural master plan, and of course, this year we're trying to squeeze wherever we can, and perhaps this isn't the right year to put a $50,000 burden on the tax levy in this regard. But to get the ball rolling, would it be prudent to use that $10,000, and maybe that's not even what's required, to form another community committee and have people from the existing cultural organizations that we have in our community? Marine Heritage comes to mind, the library, the Bruce County Museum and Archives, and form a committee that could put together the straw man idea of what a cultural master plan would look like. And then at the point where external resources are required, then we could allocate money. And I also, what I heard the Vice Deputy Mayor say, which I really liked, was to keep a keen eye out for opportunities where the provincial or federal funding is available for things such as cultural and heritage development and celebration, because there is those funds that go by and those grants that go by that we maybe don't pick up on, but be wary of or be alert to those opportunities as they come along in the next year. But I would think forming a community committee to put together the bare bones of what a cultural master plan would look like, engage the resources that we have available to us for minimal cost.
The CAO came online. You wanted to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what we could offer to do is come back to council with a subsequent report on this one. The $10,000 that are sitting in the planning reserve, we could deal with that and bring it forward through that staff report. And in that staff report, we could outline a bit more of the detail and consideration of how council could see this moving forward in 2022.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We can allocate the $10,000 today and get a report back subsequently to talk about what we can do with that money and what the approach might look like. And of course, and as Kara pointed out, I've been working on this at the county level. There's been, we do have a completed cultural action plan at the county, and that is being rolled out. And there's some specific things and some partnerships they're looking for, and working with the lower tiers is one of those things. So this might give us some resources to do that, leverage off what they've done and advance that work on the ground in Saugeen Shores. So I think giving staff a bit of time to figure out what to do with that and how to advance that and use this $10,000 makes sense. So is there a mover and seconder to approve $10,000 from the planning reserve to support a cultural heritage master plan? Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, could we receive a commitment from our CAO though, that Kara, that you are very active with taking a look at provincial federal funding for grants? I think that's something we that could be, who knows, could be announced next month where a funding source comes available. Is that something we receive that commitment from staff, that you'll actively look for funding?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that we're always doing that, but yes, I will commit that if funding becomes available, that would be applicable here. I would include that in the report to council to apply for those grants.
Thank you.
Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I'll just throw this out. If Bruce County is working on a master plan for this type of thing, as you have just alluded to, and we can do some preliminary, and Councillor Mayette said, maybe create a local committee once again to look at this, I'll ask the age-old question, why do we need a consultant to do this for us when Bruce County is doing it right now? The community could hear local input from a committee. And like I say, I'm obviously, I might be missing something, but why do we need a consultant in the first place?
So it's a good question. It's a complex matter requiring, so it dovetails with our official plan and with other things that we need to manage across municipalities. So, we need to understand what cultural heritage sites we have in the community, and then how best to manage those. That's something that needs to be done by a professional, so that we can enact those policies. I think there's definitely a role for the public. There was a role for the public in the development of the county cultural action plan, and there'll be one for development of one here. But in order for us to turn that into policy that plays out on the ground, that we can enact through official plans, zoning bylaws, et cetera, we need to employ professional planners to play that out. And it's really critical stuff. Some of the things we can do if we have a good cultural action plan is, developments in our community require archaeological studies, for example. there may be ways for us through cultural and heritage master plan to clarify where cultural and heritage sites are in the community and define those better so that we can help developers or we can help the community know when those archaeological plans are necessary and when they may not be. But that requires a professional level of study and analysis. So I think it's a combination. We'll have some public involvement and some professional involvement. We'll come up with a plan that will really make a difference on the ground and we can enact through policy. I don't know, Carrie, did you have any comments that you want to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I probably would have said something similar. Thank you.
Does that make sense, Councillor Janinski? Yeah. Okay. If there's nothing further, we do have a motion moved and seconded, $10,000 from the planning reserve for this item. All in favor? That's carried. All right, that moves us then on to item 5, housing reserve transfer and CIP funding. Comments? I'm looking at Mike. He hasn't put his hand up yet. He's sitting quietly. There he is.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I you know, this is a large one, $600,000. I put a lot of thought into this, obviously, over the last year or two, and so has council. You know, I guess I just take a look at, I take a look at our labor market in town, and I think about housing, and I think about, you know, the new Stay Rich coming on board with motel hotels, and the whole motel hotel at the south end of town, and Devonshire, the new grocery store, and 8-9 new businesses, and CCV, and all the new 54. By the way, 54 new members at the Chamber of Commerce annual meeting last night. 54 new members, new business. So that's pretty impressive. And you know, I just. Where are the people going to come from for all of the businesses that I just named? Where's the labor force coming from? And I think we as a council understand well enough that, you know, the labor force is important, and it's linked to housing. And we've got a situation. This isn't unique. The housing crisis here in Saugeen Shores. It's right across Canada. And how can we? You know, how can we put plans in place that can help incentivize? And let's talk about householders. Wouldn't it be great? We're with CIP, with the CIP program. Maybe that's where more of the focus should be, on CIP, where we're incentivizing homeowners to build secondary dwelling suites detached. I understand our planner, Jay Posner, is working on a planning policy right now around secondary dwelling suites detached policy and planning policy, and you know, what would $5,000 or $10,000 or $2,500 do, or you know, to a homeowner to help renovate an apartment above a garage, or a secondary dwelling suite attached or detached, whether it's $25,000, $5,000, $10,000 incentive. So maybe more of the focus is, you know, should be on the CIP reserve. I know there's some question around the council table about incentivizing, you know, developers with tax dollars. I get that. I understand that. That would be a concern to some. But all I know this is I was reading, you know, the provincial government statement yesterday, where they, you know, formulated the Ontario Housing Supply Action Plan. And, you know, it sounds great on paper what the province is trying to do, but, you know, when was the last time Bruce County received funding for housing development in this county? We had a development 12 years ago on Wellington Street. There's one in Kincardine just opened up this past year. We had to wait another 10 or 12 years for another development for Bruce County to come in and develop some housing for this community. I don't think we can wait for the county. And I just see this in one of the other statements the Premier made recently, and where they stated that it's everyone's responsibility, the housing crisis that we're in, not just the federal government, provincial government, Bruce County, but municipalities have to play a role too. And we've done a lot. We've hired a housing coordinator. We've changed height restrictions to 6 floors. We've made change to our zoning bylaw. Secondary dwelling suites have been approved. We've got secondary dwelling suite for detached dwelling policies being created. I think our CAO has talked a little bit about a housing policy. We changed to the official plans required where we say to developers, you must, you know, if you're going to put in 200 or 300 apartment units, maybe 20% of those units need to be at below market rent. How do we make that happen though? And I just think having funds available in a housing reserve and the CIP reserve fund would go a long ways to help place funds where they will be needed to help get these units built. Are we in the housing building business, the municipality? I've heard people say, well, it's a county responsibility, it's a federal responsibility, it's a provincial responsibility. I think it's all of our responsibility. People are hurting in this community. There's no question about it. I'm sure members of council around the table heard the same story. Where people are hurting, and the prices have skyrocketed for rentals. And buying a new home today is out of reach for a lot of people. So this reserve, I know it's a lot of money, and you know, to add $600,000, you're taking your blended rate from 5% to 8%. Probably not about a lot of appetite here, but could we at least send it back to staff to talk about how we may redirect some funds from I mean, I know there's development charges being put into the housing reserve right now, 5%, and apparently 2 or 3 builders have come on board with that, with placing funds into the housing reserve. But are there any other reserves that we could help build the CIP fund? And I don't have the answer to those. Finance department would know best, and our CAO would know best. But that's the end of my epistle. But I just think we got to keep our eye on the big prize, and that's bringing more below market rent housing into this community. It's an issue and ties directly to our labor force. And we plan on bringing in these new businesses into town. We better find housing for the people who live in. So end of my rant. Don't have the solution for that 600, but I just think can't keep our eye off the big price.
Thank you, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank the Vice Deputy Mayor for all his work that he's done on this. This is a topic that everybody knows is important, and it's the one that's hard to speak against. But I have to say, we've listened. The problem is building the new developments isn't helping get people houses because the prices are too high. We've gone from our average house prices now over $750,000. You can't rent in these brand new buildings. One of our business developers has said, what we need is apartments. How do you get the apartments? Contractors aren't building apartments, but that's what we need. We need more Ivings Drive apartments. We need more of the apartment buildings that are behind the show. Places where we can get people in that are affordable. How do you get the affordability? Well, as the Vice Deputy Mayor said, that has to be everybody's responsibility. But as the municipality, we help give, some incentives. But even if we're giving incentives to the builders, are they really passing them along? We saw the whole price of houses jump $50,000, $60,000 in a month because of escalating costs. That's even though we're giving them the incentives, that isn't being passed on. So I agree with the Vice Deputy Mayor. We have to find something. We have to find ways for people to be able to live in Saugeen Shores. Our kids will never own a house in Saugeen Shores right now because it's just beyond reach. How do we do it? I'm not sure. But $600,000 is a lot of money, and that tax jump is just too steep for me. So is there something else we could do? Are there any reserves we can do to maybe help get the CIP reserve started? I can't reasonably take on $600,000 extra.
Yeah, further questions or comments? I think what we don't have at the moment is we don't have a policy framework what the deputy, the Vice Deputy, both the comments of the Vice Deputy Mayor and the Deputy Mayor are right. Disagree with any, frankly, of what either of you said. I think we need to incentivize affordable and attainable housing, and we need to find the right ways to do that so it actually works. And we need funding, but we also need to have a good policy developed that says, here's how we're going to target that money so that it does the thing we want it to do, and so it doesn't just vaporize into somebody's pocket. So we need to do the work to develop that policy. We have a housing coordinator now, and that's good. And so we need to do that work. We need to develop that policy. Council needs to approve it, and then we need to put some funding behind whatever it says we need to do. And we have, so what we have here, you can see in this report, we have suggested reserve transfers from the Housing Reserve Fund and CIP Reserve Fund. That's money we have. It's in our reserve funds. The CIP actually has language in it that allows us to incentivize affordable and attainable housing within our CIP areas. So that money is available, and we could use it right now. We don't really need to change the name of the reserve. We could use the CIP money to incentivize affordable and attainable housing. Or in other words, to fund a new policy framework that we might develop. So I think that opportunity exists. We just need to take the first step of saying, well, how best to spend those dollars to incentivize affordable and attainable housing. So, my thoughts at the moment. I saw a few hands. I think I saw Councilor Mayette first, and the CAO came on. So we'll get Councilor Mayette, and then we'll go to CAO, and then back to the deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as you said, I agree with all of the problem statements that we've heard up to this point, and the fact that affordable rental accommodations are becoming fewer and fewer and farther and farther in between. And as a landlord, I understand the processes that are taking place provincially, if not nationally, that are causing this to happen. And it's I belong to a small landlords of Ontario organization, and people, the small landlords, the 1, 3, 5 unit landlords are getting out of the business in droves, and for a couple of main factors. One is the economics aren't there anymore. You can't raise your rent commensurate with the value of your property, and the value of your property is going up so fast that you can sell the place and make more money in a moderate investment and not have to put up with all the hassles of renters. One of the other main issues is the landlord and tenant board is very much slanted in favor of the tenants these days. And the stories that I read daily on the blog that I look at for landlords are atrocious. This past year was particularly bad when they put a moratorium on evictions. Many people, by the thousands, took that as at least license to just stop paying rent, and many landlords have gone broke because of this, and subsequently sold their places and got out of it. And then the rise of the short-term rental, the Airbnb is the main one, but there's several others. VRBO is another one. Those people are finding that they can make just as much or more money without having to put up with landlord and tenant board issues by doing it that way. So there's a myriad of issues that are taking place, and all of them are common to every municipality, all 440 of us in Ontario, and as I said, likely nationally as well. And I think what we need to do is focus our efforts on petitioning the federal and provincial governments to come up with a larger strategy for this, and to when they start seeing people living on the streets and the shelters becoming full because people can't afford housing, it becomes a national crisis, and we need to spend national money on it. We can come up with plans and we can incentivize, but if the economics are just not there, people are not going to invest in rental properties, because it's just the capital input at the beginning is too expensive, and you can't charge the rent you need to cover your costs. And then if you get a bad tenant, you're on your own. So it's a very complicated issue, and it's you can't solve it in just by throwing dollars at it. It needs a more broad national strategy, and I think we should take our opportunities at places like Roma or AMO to and I think this is a topic of conversation at the upcoming Roma conference, is how do we collectively in a broad sense come up with solutions to this problem. And it's not an easy one to fix. So I'll just leave it at that.
Sure, thank you. The CAO had a comment, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just confirm what Councillor Mayette said is that we have been making those delegations. So we did attend the AMO conference in August this year and made a delegation specifically on housing. We are partnering with Bruce County and making a delegation at the Roma conference as well on housing. So we continue to lobby our other levels of government to engage and participate in this very, very complex issue that municipalities honestly have limited tools in order to influence and impact. To follow up on a couple of points that I've heard, I agree, Mr. Mayor, on your statement that we need to develop a framework in order to support the decision making around this. And this is a piece that our supervisor of planning and our housing coordinator have been working on. So we are working on that to bring that forward for council. I have seen in my career the direct impact that municipalities are able to have in incentivizing programs and leveraging the investment from the private sector. We do know that it does work, that we can leverage. So I think I just wanted to clarify that what was in front of council on this page wasn't the existing reserves, but was looking for additional funds to go into the reserve. So I think, Mr. Mayor, you comment that we do have existing reserves, and we do, and we could update you on what's in those existing reserves, but was looking for increased funding to those reserves. And where the dollar value comes from, specifically in relationship to the community improvement plan reserve, is that we have had a number of developers come forward that are seeking municipal support after hearing this council articulate what it wants to see happening on the ground. We've had specific outreach from 4 or 5 developers that would like to start working on this issue and are looking for municipal support. So that's where the dollar figure comes from. I do think we could probably be a bit creative on how we approach that. And I think the framework is the first piece of that, as the mayor noted. I think as an outcome from this discussion today, we could go back as staff, myself, the treasurer, and our planning staff, and come forward at that next budget meeting where the final recommendation comes forward with a bit more specificity on an option for council to consider on this one.
Sure, and just to be clear, sorry, I misspoke. We do have money in the CIP reserve fund currently. It's not $350,000. I think it's around 100 and some odd thousand, and you're suggesting a $30,000 withdrawal to the Spruce to Bruce fund. So it brings it down to 80,000 or something remaining. I can't remember the number, but there's
125 remaining after that Spruce to Bruce.
That was before. So there's 150 in at the moment. Council could choose to use the 130 that remain, the 120 and change that remains to support some of that housing stuff. And there's some other reserve funds. I know there's a recommendation in the task force report about using the proceeds of the sale of lands to support affordable and attainable housing. So we do have proceeds of the sale of lands in reserve at the moment. I can't remember the name of the reserve fund, but we do have some of those reserves. I think we have to be careful about how we spend money like that, but it could be targeted to fund to support, for example, a Habitat for Humanity build or something that required us to purchase land or to improve land, or potentially to support a Bruce County build. So I think all that to say, we do have some funding we could tap into to support these kinds of projects right now. Before we were to make, if obviously we made these transfers, we'd have a lot more, but we do have some. I think the deputy mayor had a comment earlier. Sorry, the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see our new housing coordinator have a little bit of time to come up with a plan, as you mentioned, and our CAO mentioned. Give them that year to look at, see what's going on, and come back to us with a report mid-year next year to tell us what they're thinking, where they're going, and what they require. And at that point, we can look at adding into next year's budget. Another thing is Bruce Peninsula has gone and they've put some taxation on their Airbnbs and rental units to try and help the local rental sources, because people are just taking what they have and they're charging exorbitant amounts for daily and weekly use, where that could also be used for rentals for the people in the area. Was that something that this council might have an appetite for, is looking at and creating a policy similar to what South Bruce Peninsula has put in? Your thoughts, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I don't think, that sort of gets us well off topic here, so I'm not sure we want to get into debating that today. But I mean, if you wanted to bring it forward, either if the administration wanted to bring it forward to discussion, or if you wanted to bring a resolution at a different meeting to get it on the table for discussion, we could certainly have a debate at that time.
What I'd like to see, Mr. Mayor, is when we help subsidize the builders, that we see what the cost of the building is that they're going to be producing. If it's still in the $700,000 or $2,200 to $2,500 a month rental, that's not affordable. We need to have some way.
Sure. I think we, and I don't want to go on too much longer debating this one. I think I'd like us to get to a decision on the question before us. I think that one thing to say, and everybody has, most of us probably are aware that in 2022, we're going to have an awful lot of apartment developments proposed. I mean, there's a lot of proposed apartment blocks that developers want to bring forward in this year. And if you build several hundred new apartment units, even at market, you will start to address the issue, because that will leave several hundred older units that will be less competitive, and that will start to make things more attainable. There's issues. You think because of the supply and demand situation, a landlord can now set the bar very high for tenants before they accept them. A landlord can say in our community, well, if you're not earning you're not earning 4 times a month what we're charging you, we're not even going to consider your application for tenancy, right? Some of that's happening. Landlords have so many choices that they can raise them and also make their units less accessible to people with lower incomes. If you get more stock on the market, you start to take those options away. So we're going to get stock. It's going to come on the market. We're going to start to see that happen in 2022 in a big way. So I think there's lots of ways to skin that cat, but I think from our perspective here today, the discussion is, are we going to add more money right now to these reserves, or will we proceed with the money we have, look to create a policy, and then consider what we need to do once we have that policy in place and what the funding window should look like? I'm getting the sense that what we're going to do is do that policy and then consider it. But that's, I guess I would like to get some direction from you, and then we'll move on. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think all of what you said makes perfectly good sense. So you mentioned earlier about the vacancy rate, and I think, 0.5% vacancy rate right now in the town of Saugeen Shores, and no wonder prices are so high. The places are filled up. 0.5% is not a lot of vacant apartment buildings, apartment units. I think if we could send this back to staff, I'm hoping in the first quarter, perhaps that, or if not sooner, we can see a report back to address this report right here and take a look at our reserves, where the funds are available. Can be some reallocation, and take a look at continuing to build our housing reserve, because we talked about Skyline on Devonshire. Yeah, that's fine, but they're $1,600 for 1 bedroom up to $2,400 for 3 bedroom. Let's talk about $800 and $1,000 and $1,200 for 1, 2, 3 bedroom at below market rent. And how do you make those numbers work? Developers have to make money. There's no question we want them to make money. You said that many times, Mr. Mayor. But how do we, if there's 300 units being built, or 500 units, new units being built in 2022, we've heard some good news lately that developers are looking at building apartment units. Say there are 500 built. How good would it be if 20% of those units, 100 units, were below market rent, and let the other ones be market or above, make their money? But how can we make those numbers work for the 800, 1,000, 1,200 for 1, 2, 3 bedroom? That's where the missing middle is. Those people that have household income less than $40,000, there's not much left at the end of the month. So I like to see a report come back and say, how can we continue to to build the housing reserve, the CIP fund, and that planning policy around incentivizing the homeowners to build secondary dwelling suites to place more rentals onto the market to help drive down the prices. So I hope that could happen in the first quarter, if not sooner, Kara. That's something staff could bring back. Or
Okay, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll make that motion that we defer this for now, have a report come back in the first quarter, first half of the year, and we go from there.
Okay, so to defer in anticipation of a report on policy. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Mayette. Is there any discussion about that resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Okay. Now we're on to item 6, the Lamont Sports Park operational considerations and washrooms. Questions or comments? Direction. I'll ask for direction rather than questions or comments. Direction. To the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we move forward to have the Lamont Sports Park up and running for 23, we do need the washroom. So I'll be moving that is there any way that we can subsidize this through anything to help cut the cost down, Daniel? But I will be moving that we accept this.
So for the washroom specifically, the sheet does say that future capital reserve might be an appropriate place for council to fund those from if they wish to move forward with them in 2022.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, we're scheduled to, I know Steve Hardy's on the call here today. I was going to ask him for a comment here. We're opening that facility in the spring of 2023. I think Jane Jagaleski, our former director, was talking about a $750,000 or $1 million fundraising or a washroom facility. I think staff have looked at that and said, hey, look, we can do more of the portable type units that they have at the Port Algon Tourist Camp, for example, but they take time to manufacture. If we want washroom facilities open in time for the spring 2023 ribbon cutting ceremony, I agree with Deputy Mayor Matheson that this may be the year to draw down our future capital reserves. It's 1.48 million. If we take the 320, we're still at 1.1 million. This may be a year to draw down the future capital reserve. The washrooms have to be built at some point. 750 we were going to spend compared to this 300 amount is a lot better number in my view. And Steve, I guess the question I have is to the Director of Community Services is if we were to move forward with constructing these, ordering these portable washrooms, how long do they take, Steve? Like, what's the backlog on these portable units right now? Can they even be ready for the spring of 2023? I guess is my question.
Yeah, thank you for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. In speaking with our parks manager, Frank Burrows, the lead time has been extended as many things have in the construction industry. So the ones that we installed in Lakeview, they came fairly quickly, but obviously there was lead time on the development and construction of those as well. But yeah, we could be well over a year to have the units manufactured and delivered to site. So staff's intent would be to issue an RFP early in 2022 and have that awarded well before spring 2022, which would allow for the installation and setup in early 2023.
I guess my concern, Mr. Mayor, if we left it to the 2023 budget, you're looking at washrooms in 2024. They have to be built at some point in time. I don't think things are going to get a whole lot cheaper, but I would be supporting our Deputy Mayor on this one, that I think we need to move forward with the ordering of those washrooms through Community Services Department. It takes up to a year. Let's get them done, in my view.
Refresh my memory, was washrooms included in the fundraising? Helen, we pulled that out. So like, it just seems funny to me, got a little over $250,000 for a portable washroom, modular washrooms, but but the $500,000 was for permanent washrooms, right? That was what was in the plan. Am I right about that, Steve?
Yeah, you're correct. There is a placeholder within the 5-year capital identifying $500,000. And again, that's a rough guesstimate. There's no construction cost put to that. There's also the septic system and the utilities and those type of water services that would need to be run to that building as well, that were not included in the $500,000.
And when does that show up in 5-year capital?
Within the parks, 5-year capital is 2023, I believe.
So we have we have $500,000 in the 5-year capital forecast for permanent washrooms 2023, and we're going to spend $275 this year on temporary ones. That doesn't make any sense. That's senseless.
We
Right,
would
so-
be
so-
we would be removing that $500,000 from the 5-year capital plan.
But you're going to spend more than half of it to get something temporary, or you just spend $500,000. I mean, you could borrow the $500,000, you borrow it from, or you could add it to phase 2. I just think that I don't know. It just seems good, like throwing good money after bad to do it that way.
Mr. Mayor, these are not temporary washrooms. The washrooms that we put in at the Port Algon Tourist Camp are permanent washrooms. They're,
But they're modular though. I mean, they're not, okay, temporary. I didn't use a good word, but less than the quality of washrooms that we want, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, Steve can comment on the effectiveness of the Port Algon Tourist Camp. I've been in them. They're pretty efficient. They're attractive. I don't think, and the 500 that Jana had in as a placemat did not include the servicing. It was around $750,000 compared to 300. So it's less than half the cost. But I hear what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. You're thinking,
yeah, as long as I'm clear, like
permanent
the way things we've gone with this development is council's been keen to proceed with the higher level on everything on this thing, right? So I don't want to see a situation arise where we build the 275 and then council says, well, what we'd really like is the higher level version, and then we wasted 275. So I'm content. I mean, if we want to spend 275 and take washrooms out of the future schedule, and this is all we're ever going to do for washrooms, that's fine. But I'm just wondering if that's really the understanding that council has. If it is, then let's make sure that's the understanding. Councilor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Steve. Steve, what's the longevity of these temporary washrooms?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the washrooms that were installed in the tourist camp were, from anything we're hearing, the users are really enjoying them. They're built with good quality materials, and we've had a lot of good comments about the construction of those washrooms. So I anticipate that there's going to be a long life, well over 25 years, I would suspect, for those washrooms, without getting into major refurbishments of them.
Okay. Are there further questions or comments? I think I saw Daniel put his hand up earlier. I see Councilor Smith. Councilor Smith.
Thank you, and through you to Steve. Do we have any sense of other, I'll call world-class facilities that use this type of washroom facility? We're building what is intended to be a very high-class facility, and much to your point, Mr. Mayor, I see this as an odd placement for this, but if there is a sense that this exists elsewhere and this isn't sort of a trial, I might be convinced at some significant cost savings, but otherwise I was under the impression that this was, quote, temporary, and had the same question to you in my notes as to whether or not this could be then transferred to another facility that would need replacement, when the permanent solution was put in place at Lamont Sports Park. So I guess my question through you, Mr. Mayor, back to Steve, is about whether examples of this type of infrastructure exist.
In my familiarity with the various sports parks and complexes, you can see a number of different solutions for washroom facilities. We see them all over the place, where we have portable washrooms that are serviced on a regular basis by outside contractors. We see larger construction projects that have more permanent type structures and pavilions. So it really comes down to what's affordable and what's preferred by the individual municipalities and complexes that are being constructed. But yeah, I've seen everything from portable washrooms to the modular that we see at the tourist camp to the more permanent structure. So really it comes down to what's affordable and what's preferred.
Okay. Further questions or comments? Councilor Davinsky.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, the fact of the matter is we're going to need washrooms in time for our 2023 opening. It would be a shame if we're still spinning our wheels on this. So as you had suggested, Mr. Mayor, either we go full pop, and if so, can we get permanent washrooms in time for the opening? Or are we behind the eight ball here as far as timing goes, and we just need to have something there so there are at least washroom facilities at Lamont Sports Park? And I guess my question is directed through you to Steve Hardy.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, by all means, if council's interested in pursuing a more bricks and mortar type structure, that could in fact be the direction that we receive, and in fact do an RFP for construction of those in the spring of 2021 or very soon in the new year, which would allow for construction in the fall of 2022 and be readily available for the operational season in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, Councilor Davinsky. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say by Mr. Hardy's timeline, it looks like we would be spinning our wheels if we go with this modular thing. We should go with the bricks and mortar and get it done so we have something there in time for our grand opening.
I think it's also important to remember that, you know, council made a deliberate decision to build this thing without washrooms because that was the cost we were willing to bear. And so, you know, you can also have portable washrooms like we have in our other facilities until you want to build something more permanent on the timeline that we have in our capital plan. You don't have to put in modular washrooms or bricks and mortar today. You can do, you know, we have portable washrooms in other facilities. That's not what we want to see permanently. Nobody's suggesting that, but it is something you can do until we can get it into the financing plan to do it right. You know, I think that could be done operationally. You don't have to have, you can even have nice portable washrooms that you can rent at a pretty good rate in terms of and just include that in the operating budget. So I don't think you should feel pinned down up on this question because there's ways to get washrooms into the facility. And if it had been our plan to put washrooms in at bricks and mortar in time for the opening, we would have included it in the capital plan to begin with, and they'd already be built. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for bringing that up. It was my thoughts exactly that we should put $10,000 or $15,000 in the operational budget and put in some porta potties for this summer. Get the place up and running. Is it world class? Perhaps not. Is it functional? It is. And then as we get more comfortable with the place, we'll find out what we want to do in the longer term. This isn't the time for spending $250,000 on washrooms.
I think I saw Steve. Steve, I talked over there. Steve.
Thank you. If I could, I'd just like to add a couple quick comments that I think there's this conversation has been revolving here slightly around the fact that the modular washrooms are temporary. And I'd just like to clarify that, no, they are a modular design. So they are built off site and brought onto our site, which would sit on a concrete pad. And in essence becomes a permanent facility. So it's just to clarify that it's modular design, hauled to our site, delivered to the site, set up on site. So it is more of a permanent type facility. And second point, there are 2 points or two areas of conversation for this this request, and the one is operational, which has been identified at the top of the points there, which add up to $46,000 for the operational to maintain the park and create an operational maintenance plan for the park for the long term, and the capital cost being the $275,000. So there are really 2 components to this request.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying both those things. I had misunderstood the first bit, so I'm glad that you clarified that. That's good, and we will deal with the operational request. But let's just deal with the 2 things separately because they're kind of different. So let's just talk about the two. Let's resolve our position on the 275 for the modular washrooms, and then we'll circle back to the 46,000 requested for operational expenses. I guess I'd state my preference would be that we don't spend the 275 this year and we stick to the plan and we do as Councillor Mayette suggested and wait till the point in the capital forecast where we're going to spend the money and build permanent washrooms at the class we want to see them at. That was the plan we had when we set out on this thing, and I think we should stick to it. Other thoughts? Don't hear other thoughts, so we'll take that as no. Councillor Mayette.
I'll make that comments that I made a motion and.
Okay, well, I don't think we really need a motion not to do a thing.
Oh, okay.
But I just said my suggestion would be that we don't do this 275 this year. That's just my view. I'm keen to hear what others want to do. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, if we're going to have $500,000 in the budget, which as the Vice Deputy said will be more because there's the septic and all that to put in, and we can have it up and running for the 2023 season, I'm all for that, but it's going to cost 2 to 3 times more what we have budgeted here. These modular units are fantastic. They're great down at Lakeview, but I do not want to see a row of porta potties sitting at this venue.
I think that's so. What Councillor Mayette and I are suggesting is that indeed we do not construct anything until the point in the capital forecast that it's been projected for and been projected there all along, and that indeed you would have some portable washrooms there on a temporary basis until you build something permanent, which, as again, is what council did when it set this thing up. If we had wanted to build them with the first thing, we could have done it, but we didn't. And to try and rush right now and jam it in before 2023, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't line up with what we decided we would do a year ago. Anyway, that again, now I'm arguing with you. I shouldn't be doing that. Are there further comments? Give us some direction. If you want to spend the 275 or on this, then give us a motion and let's consider it. If you don't, then let's move on.
I'm confused. How do you want to move forward? Do you want to?
Well, I just need some clarity from council. If council wants, if council wants to do it, because we don't need a resolution not to do it, but if council wants to do it, I want to hear a resolution and then we'll vote on it and we'll move on. If there is no motion, then there'll be nothing to consider and we'll move on. The treasurer can comment. The treasurer.
Yeah, it's good discussion. It was the intent of staff to have council have this discussion in the way, and I think you've all brought up the relevant points. I'll just say for the permanent facility, I believe staff's original intention was if council chooses a permanent facility to have it coincide with phase 2 of the Lamont Sports Park. And so I think that kind of echoes the mayor's comments, but that's and maybe Steve can speak to that of whether it needs to be part of phase 2 or whether it can be earlier, but that was the original intent.
And important to note, if the when the fundraising committee is successful at raising $1 million, council will need to come up with 1.25 million, which we'll have to borrow. And at that time, we'll be borrowing anyway. So perhaps we would look at borrowing the additional funds to construct the washroom facility at that time as planned with phase 2. So we can, there's a funding option at that point. The deputy mayor.
To move this forward, Mr. Mayor, since the modular washrooms will be funded through future capital reserves, I move that we take that in and move that forward. Give us the time to get it ordered and in place.
So it's been moved by the deputy mayor that we fund $275,000 towards Lamont's Park washrooms from the future capital reserve. Is there a seconder? Councillor Smith seconds. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's defeated. Okay. So that moves us then on to, oh, sorry, I promised Steve I'd go back to the operation. I need to do that. So we're at, so there's $46,000 there requested from the director to fund operational expenses in 2022 to look after the facility. Questions, discussion on that. So I'll ask a question right off the bat, Steve. My understanding, I don't know if it's in this report or if it's somewhere else, I've lost track now, but you were suggesting, oh, there it is. Revenues from the facility are estimated to be $50,000 a year once it's operating in 2023, which at least will partially offset the would fully offset the 46,000, but would only partially offset the fully annualized cost of maintaining the park. I wonder, am I understanding that correctly? I guess is my question.
To some extent, that's correct. The entire operation of the park in 2023 and beyond will need to be evaluated in terms of operational costs and revenues. Obviously, right now, the municipality is incurring expenses and obviously the benefit of revenues on the existing facilities. And as we come forward with the decommissioning plan of some of those other facilities, that will offset some of the costs that will be related to the Lamont Sports Park. So yes, in 2023, the cost will look substantially different for about the provision of sports facilities, but we don't know exactly what those will be yet until we evaluate the revenue shifting as well as the expense shifting to the Lamont Sports Park.
So I just wonder if we could consider, and I put this to council, if we could consider this year's, the 2022 operational expense as essentially a one-time expense. We don't know, there's several decisions to be made. We need to know how much revenue we're expecting. We need to know which fields we're going to decommission and how we can reallocate resources. It could well be there's no financial impact to operations in future years, or it'll be different at least than what we're seeing here. I'm wondering if we should fund the 2022 operational expenses from the tax stabilization reserve and consider it one-time expense for this year. It may be that we have to come up with some additional levy dollars in 2023, but we can't know that until Steve develops a more, Steve or his successor develops a more comprehensive business plan. So I put that to you as a suggestion. I do think we need to start to absorb the operating costs of this facility. So we have to spend some money on this. I'll put it to your thoughts. The Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with you. Let's do it through the reserves that you mentioned and move this forward. One time.
So we'll consider that a motion from the Deputy Mayor to fund $46,000 from the tax stabilization reserve. Is there a seconder for the resolution by Councillor Davinsky? Is there any discussion? I don't see any. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. So then that moves us on to item 7, the nodes and corridors study. Discussion. Direction. I don't hear any direction. Is there I guess, is there anybody who wants to make a resolution to do this? $100,000, 50 from the tax levy or the future capital reserve. Amanda, do you have comments on it? I just see you pop online there.
I just wanted to be available to answer any questions, but I can just explain that this is one of the initiatives to help determine where growth and height and those things in the town go. So it would be a guiding policy that could help us with the housing portfolio, and that was the intention of it.
Councillor Mayette.
Although I grasp the concept and I agree that something like this might be useful in guiding our future development plans, $100,000 for a study at this point in time when we're looking at efficiencies and trying to keep our tax rate increase down, I think I would like to go without this one for now.
Okay. Does anybody wish to make a motion to move it forward? If not, that's going once, that's going twice. It's going for a third time and it's gone. So we're going to move on. We will not move forward with that one. Item 8, paved shoulders on concession 10. Direction. Councilor Mayat.
Is concession 10 in the, sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is concession 10 in the Dahl Side Road planned to be resurfaced this year?
The director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have our annual asphalt program that we are going to do on concession 10. So because this road has the two names, so it depends on which end you're on. If we have this included, then it'll be the Dahl Side Road end. If we don't have this included, then we're going to do the concession 10 end for a shorter distance.
Okay, so part of this loop, or I guess it's a dog leg, is going to get done. It just depends on whether we allocate these taxation dollars towards it. Depends on which section you're going to do. Is that what you're saying?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So we will do from, with this included, we'll do from where we finished Dahl Side Road and continue around the loop. And if we don't, we'll miss this piece that's in decent or better shape than the piece that's not in good shape, and only do the part that is in very poor shape.
And that's the section that goes along by the police station.
I just have to confirm, but I believe it's east of that section. That's the rough shape, but I will find that out.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that we do the section from Highway 21 to the curve or Dahl Side Road. Are there any reserves that we can pull on this for? That road is in terrible shape. The sides are broken down. So we could use any of the monies that would be normally allocated for putting the gravel on the shoulders to go towards this. But that road is broken down and not fit. This would also fit in with the bicycle friendly application that we'll be putting forward, because we'll be improving the safety and pedestrian access.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is one that would qualify for the OCIF core asset piece as well, because this would be defined as core assets.
Okay, so we've done, just as I run the ledger in my head, we funded capital sidewalk for whatever that was, 40,000 or something out of OCI with OCIF. So you could direct that this would be funded $225,000 from OCIF should that funding be received. So is there, does somebody want to make a resolution to that effect? The Deputy Mayor moves it. Is there a seconder? Councilor Davinsky? Is there any discussion about that? Just so we're clear, to fund $225,000 for paved shoulders on concession 10 from the OCIF funding, which is pending but not yet fully approved. The director has a comment.
Thank you, through. I just wanted to answer Deputy Mayor's question. And the if we don't move forward with this, then yes, we will do concession 10 from Highway 21, 400 meters with paved shoulders.
So, so the resolution's been put on the floor on that. I do. So the I'm not going to support the resolution. I think it's not a bad idea, but I'm keen to preserve that OCIF funding for some more high priority items down the list. We're going to get the damaged portion of the road fixed. We're continuing to fix this road, and several other roads in the township of Saugeen are going to come under construction this year, which I think is positive. I don't think it's pressing that we add this year. I think it's a nice to have and a positive thing, but not an essential thing. And there's some essential things down the list that I'd like to get to. So for that reason, I'm not going to support it. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that, but council also did make a motion previously that as we repaired the roads, we would be doing paved shoulders. It does improve the lifespan of the road, so that's just something for council to think about as they're about to vote.
Further comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
And sorry, I misunderstood. Clarify for me again. I'm in support of putting in paved bike shoulders if and when we're reconstructing roads, repairing roads. I think that's the right time to do it. I don't support paving shoulders if it's at a time where we're not reconstructing, not repaving. Is this a section, clarify for me again, is this section of road being replaced, repaired? Say again?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this would just be paved shoulders along the existing section that's in good shape from Doll Side Road down to the curve. And I believe some asphalt, no, actually that's what it is. It was just be the new paved shoulders from Doll Side Road down to the bend.
Not reconstructing or repairing the road.
I think that's what the director said.
Yeah.
They're just adding.
I remember last year we went over the same discussion, and I remember back the Parks and Trails Master Plan 2004 that was done. So when roads are being reconstructed, pave your shoulders at that time. I still support that angle. It is a lot of money. I think there are other higher priorities in this year's budget that you can spend $225,000 on. So I will not be supporting this addition.
Okay, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Amanda. So Amanda, from Highway 21 to 400 meters, is that being reconstructed or was this just for paved shoulders?
That piece is being reconstructed 400 meters with paved shoulders on its own project.
So that is it going forward regardless?
It is proposed by staff under the asphalt resurfacing capital program. So that would be up to you if you want to keep that project in or not, but it is in the base budget that has been presented.
Okay, so it is reconstruction and it does fall under our plan of fixing the roads as we reconstruct.
Yeah. Okay, is everyone clear? Is there any other questions about this one? There is a motion to advance it. If there's no other discussion, the Deputy Mayor.
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, it's not the Doll Side Road portion because the motion up there said it's either the Doll Side Road portion or 21 to the curve. So my motion is to reconstruct the 21 to the curve to 400 meters with this paved shoulders.
Yes. Okay.
But just hold on.
Okay. I'm a
well,
little lost now.
I thought we're maybe talking about two different things here. Then I support if a road is being reconstructed, it's 400 meters of road with paved shoulders. I support that. So I'm confused what I'm supporting.
I think the director's been very clear. Under the existing asphalt resurfacing budget that's in the base budget, we will be reconstructing part of the 10th concession with paved shoulders. What's being proposed is to add paved shoulders to parts of the road which are not going to be reconstructed. It's to add paved shoulders to a section of the road that would just add the shoulders, no other work proposed. So that's what's proposed.
Understood, but the motion we're voting on though, we're voting on this sheet right here for paved shoulders for newly constructed roads. So
that's what's proposed in this on the sheet.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yep, the Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, in reading the notes, there was the two parts to it. So if we turn this down, the part that really needs to be fixed is already in the budget. I will withdraw my motion to pave the Doll Side Road portion of this.
Okay. So it's the motion's withdrawn. Councillor Davinsky.
And I, as a seconder, will withdraw as well. I misunderstood.
Okay, good enough. No, it's God Almighty, we're this deep into the day. It's amazing. I'll be amazed if we can understand anything at this point. So anyway, that's good. I think, yeah. All right. So the motion's off the table. I don't see any interest in revisiting the motion from anyone else. So that item is not going to proceed. We'll move forward then to item 9, Port Elgin Airport Committee, and they request an increase to their funding from the tax levy of $1,000. I would suggest we support this. Anybody want to do that for me? The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Carr, any discussion? No, all in favor? Carried. Okay, then that moves us on to, dear, the Saugeen Beach Road rehabilitation. Councillor, or pardon me, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, is this an Osif fundable project? I just think that, pardon me?
Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you. Carry on.
Yeah, I just think that I'm not sure we want to delay it another year. I see that they were asking for tax levy or future capital reserve. To me, if it fits under OSIF, that may be an option in my view.
Yeah, and this is why in my comments on the one we just discussed, I had suggested I wanted to hold out for more pressing ones. This one's pretty critical. I mean, we have to fix this road. So I think it would be good to put the money forward, and if OSIF comes through, to fund it through OSIF. So Vice Deputy Mayor.
Well, I just make that a motion, Mr. Mayor, and put it on if I can get a seconder.
It's moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that we fund $431,250 for the Saugeen Beach Road rehabilitation from OCIF funding, should that funding come through. One other comment that I will make on this one is this comment of an SPCA permit being required. I don't see why. It's existing infrastructure. It's approved. It's right where it is. It's not going anywhere. I mean, it's existed longer than the SPCA has existed. So I don't see any reason why we should go to the SPCA for a permit for the project. I think we should start construction and get it done. Just my thoughts. Is there any other discussion on the resolution? Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If OCIF funding doesn't come through, these, I think we have two projects now dedicated to OCIF funding. What happens to the projects? Do they die on the vine, or would they come back to council for further discussion?
Well, they won't be funded, and I think then staff would have to come back to us and say, look, the Saugeen Beach Road project has no funding source. What do you want to do? And we could then have a discussion at that point if we wanted to fund it from another set of reserves or what we wanted to do. But that's what we're at the moment. It would be a approved project without a funding source, which we'd have to discuss.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion before we take the vote on that one? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, then that moves us on to the Saugeen Memorial Hospital Foundation CT scanner request. There's no number proposed in this one. So we'll look for direction. The Vice Deputy Mayor. Oh, there's some numbers. Oh, you're on mute, Mike. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, start this conversation off. Council may wish to challenge this one, but I like to suggest a $250,000 contribution phased in over 5 years. I think this is a good use for $50,000 for this council to make that decision this year. Future councils can certainly talk about the remaining 200 in future years, but I'd like to see the NWMO fund access for this. I think it's a good community use. It impacts our entire community potentially. And I know NWMO, we've used it for beautification, other projects, but I think that might be a good use for this fund. That's a starting point for council to think about anyway.
So just to be clear then, so what you're suggesting is a $250,000 donation over a 5-year period with a resolution in 2022 from this council to fund the first $50,000 installment from the NWMO reserve.
That's correct.
Okay. So I take that as a motion from you, the Vice Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder for what the Vice Deputy Mayor is suggesting? Councillor Grace. So that's on the table as a resolution. Is there discussion to the resolution? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Daniel. Daniel, how much do we have in the NWMO reserve?
Just give me one moment here. There is $344,000.
I'm good with the 250, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, yeah, and recognizing, of course, that future councils can choose to allocate it from a different funding source, should they choose to. Any other discussion about this one? Seeing none, then all in favor? That's carried. Okay, then that moves us on to Saugeen. Oh, we dealt with item 12, so we're not worried about that one. Then we're on to sidewalk clearing in Southampton, and actually Councillor Grace withdrew that one I saw last night. It is before us though, if other members, if anybody wishes to discuss it. Councillor Grace?
Can I just make a comment, Mr. Mayor, about why I'm withdrawing this? It's not to diminish the importance of having as many clear sidewalks as we can to provide pedestrian access. That would be ideal. There are two reasons why I withdrew this request. One is that earlier in our budget discussion last week, the director indicated that in her proposal for purchasing a new sidewalk clearing machine, that she's leaving the tender open to more expensive options, which might include several machines as opposed to just one, if I understand that correctly. So that may open up more options for sidewalk clearing if that occurs. And then the other thing that has changed since I put this original request in is our already high projected increase to the blended tax rate. And given the expense of this, that's why I'm withdrawing. And hopefully next year, a future council will see a way forward on this.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And I think we are adding some sidewalk clearing capacity in 2022, so for 2023. So I think the future is looks bright for being able to keep biting off more and more of this sidewalk over time. So, all right, with that, then we'll move on to 14, studies and plans, engineering, consolidated linear infrastructure, cottage street designs, downtown parking. Some of this looks not wholly optional. So I guess I'll turn it over to the director, maybe just to give us a bit of context before we discuss it.
Sure, thank you. I went through a recent webinar on the consolidated linear infrastructure, and our staff had started to work on it. So I can withdraw that 25,000 out of this request now. I believe it's something that we can handle working with the ministry internally. The other two, the cottage street is something that has come through discussions with council, and then the downtown parking study is a recommendation from the transportation master plan that I would like to carry forward.
Okay, so now we're considering $60,000 worth of expenses towards those two items the director just mentioned. So discussion, direction. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These Cottage Street study is my suggestion. And it's intended, my intention or my vision for that would be something that would apply to all of our cottage areas in town. The transportation master plan did identify that there should be some specific types of street designs that would be more appropriate. For my thought about this, that I approached staff about last spring, was that I think it would be beneficial to staff in terms of saving time, as well as to residents, to bring forward a study which allows for meaningful public consultation in a broad sense, as opposed to a sort of more isolated street by street approach, which I think has been happening, so that as we approach one street, one area, then those residents get involved. And I'd like to see this as a more of a completing a vision, because I think it's really important for us to preserve our cottage areas character. I see that again, as I've made this pitch before, but it's an important part of our economic development plan. Preserving that character attracts people either to stay in our area, attracts tourists, it attracts people to make investments in their homes and to move into our area. So that's why I'd like to see that that study go forward, and that is proposed to come out of the future capital reserve, so it would not be affecting our tax levy.
Okay. Thank you. Further comments on that one or the downtown parking one for 40,000? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I'm reading this correct, the cottage and downtown parking study is all coming from reserves. There's no hit to the tax levy.
That's what's proposed, yeah.
Then I move that this be adopted.
Okay, that's been moved by the Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Grace. I guess my question to the director may be, what is the outcome exactly of the downtown parking study that we're hoping to achieve?
There are two pieces to it. One is to determine if we have sufficient parking to support the businesses down there. And the second piece would be where it should go. So the Transportation Master Plan recommended removing the on-street parking on Goddard Street in Port Elgin to enable traffic to flow through those signalized intersections better. And this study will either reinforce that or say the parking is necessary to be in that location. And then we'll work on keeping the flow of traffic the same. But if they do that, then if they look at removing that parking, I assume the study will come back saying we need to build a municipal lot, and then they'll give direction or recommendations as to proximity to those businesses to match the service provided by the on-street parking.
See, this is why I wonder whether it's worth doing the study, because we can get a study and the study could say remove the parking in Goddard Street, but that parking ain't going nowhere, right? I mean, we all know that. We're not taking the parking off Goddard Street. Politically, that's not going to happen. So why study it? I just don't know. It doesn't seem like it's worth studying since we're not going to do it. So I don't know. That's my thought. Councillor Davinsky, or no, pardon me, Councillor Mayette. You guys switched places quickly, and it looked like you were one was the other. Councillor Mayette.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's actually me. Yeah. And I just heard what you said, and I tend to agree. And far from being scientific about it, I've been parking and attending businesses and events downtown Port Elgin and in Southampton for that matter. And I can barely remember one time, maybe during Pumpkin Fest, that I wasn't able to find a parking space somewhere. Like we've all been in that situation in downtown Toronto or other larger municipalities where you just can't find a parking spot anywhere. Well, I don't remember ever experiencing that in Port Elgin. You may have to walk another block to get to the back parking lot on Bricker Street or behind the library, but I've never been in a situation, and like I say, it's not a scientific study, but my personal observations are our parking situation is adequate. Until we get to a situation where it becomes critical, I would prefer that we don't spend $40,000 on another binder of paper.
I understand the director's intent and it's to implement the transportation master plan. I know what it's like to remove one parking spot from downtown Port Elgin, and I know that removing them all just isn't, it just can't be done. So I don't see a lot of purpose in that one. And my preference would be, I would content to proceed with what Councillor Grace is suggesting on the 20,000 for the cottage streets and a plan around that. But I would rather not support the downtown parking study. So I know we have a resolution for both of them. I think I have it moved and seconded. The Deputy Mayor.
I'd like to amend the motion just to do the Southampton cottage study. Southampton Port Elgin cottage study.
Sure. And who, we had a seconder on that one. Who was the seconder? I'm sorry, Councillor Grace seconded. So you're okay with that, Councillor Grace? Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
I'll be supporting that, Mr. Mayor. I think it makes perfect sense, and what you said makes perfect sense too. I hope we as a council and staff continue to be on the lookout for lands, particularly west of Godrich Street. I do believe that an additional parking lot on the west side of the businesses at some point in time in the future. And I know we've made attempts in the past looking at lands, and we need to continue to do that. So I hope staff will continue to be on the lookout for properties that we might be able to develop in the future for parking, particularly on the west side.
Yeah, agreed. If there's nothing further, then, you've heard the resolution. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. So then we're on to item 15, the tar and chip experiment. Comments. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is just what it looks like. This will be an experiment. And I presume that the director chose Side Road 1819, which is where the new Cole Bridge is that correct, Amanda? Is it where the section you're, not the new McEwen Bridge?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah. And so this is something that I've been talking about for as long as I've been on council, is using the option of tar and chip. We haven't done any upgrades to any gravel roads as long as I've been on council. The last remaining concession roads and the river road are have just been gravelled and graded and gravelled and graded and gravelled and graded in a repeat cycle. And I know a lot of the gravel ends up in the ditch. And I know that Aaron Eldersley does an extensive program of this tar and chip, which is a compromise between asphalt and a straight gravel road. And we've never undertaken that type of surfacing in Saugeen Shores, but I think it's worth trying in this limited capacity. There is also, I presume, and Amanda, I'd ask you to maybe confirm this, I presume offsetting cost reduction in applying of gravel and grading the road a couple or three times a year, which we normally do with our normal operating budget for gravel road maintenance. So you do this and you don't have to grade it and you don't have to put new gravel on it every year. So the 56 should result in some kind of an offsetting reduction in that department as well. And once again, I'll ask the director to confirm that assumption.
We would not grade it once it has tar or the surface treatment on it. Once you surface treat it, you do need to resurface it in 2 to 3 years. And then after that, you get about 6 to 7 years out of that. So instead of the 25 to 50 of hard asphalt, you do have, and then instead of us doing regrading every 3 years, you would get 7 years out of the tar and chip surface treatment on this. I would like to add, this is the perfect time and place to do this experiment because we have brand new asphalt on the same road, and then we're going to have gravel on the same road as well. So in this instance, time will not be a factor, weather will not be a factor, and it'll be the same traffic along this piece. So it is an ideal time to try the experiment.
And thank you. And for that reason, I would ask for council's support in bringing this along. And if it's successful, maybe it's something that we can look at in the longer term for the people that live on these gravel roads. So, the River Road comes to mind. We haven't done anything. Well, we put the new limestone stone chip gravel on there, stone dust gravel on that road a few years ago, which was a vast improvement over the normal pit run or A gravel that was done before. But they still, you can understand how those people feel when they have to wash their car every time they come to town, essentially, right? So I'd like council support. This is $56,000. I think will be well spent, and it'll give us some hard data to work on, hard surface data, I should say.
Were you suggesting 56,250 from the tax levy? Yes?
Yes.
All right.
Well, could there be any room for taking some of that out of the gravel road maintenance budget? Once again, I refer to the director.
It would mean not doing the gravel maintenance on another road because 1819 was not on this year's plan. So it would be transferring from one gravel road to this instead.
But isn't it right that all the gravel roads in town get some kind of, well, they grade it anyway, right? They just don't get new gravel every year.
Correct.
Right. So this one wasn't on the schedule, but it wouldn't need to be graded anyway. So I guess taxation is the best way to pay for this. Yes.
Okay. Is there other comments, the Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say with the concession 10 being done, was that supposed to be, Amanda, was there supposed to be grading and gravel put on that this year? Or is that lump sum included in the reconstruction of the road?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Do you mean the asphalt resurfacing program that we proposed from the highway 400
Yes.
meters?
Yes. Now, was that section of concession 10 supposed to have gravel put on it this year?
Oh, I understand. I apologize. Thank you for that. No, it was not. We had looked at the other side of Highway 21 on concession 10 for gravel shouldering.
That was done last year, was it not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not from the trail towards the lake, only part.
Amanda, could this project be funded from OCIF?
I believe it would be able to because it is improvement of a core asset. I would have to look deeply if we had it as a pilot project. That might be where the issue comes, but then we could use this for gas tax and take the new OCIF and transfer that to a different road reconstruction project where we're using gas tax from. So there would be a way to make it work.
I think that, that's an opportunity then if, I think it would be one of these things where if OCIF came through, it would proceed. If it didn't, it wouldn't. But I think that it would be a way to get it on the books and hopefully OCIF does come through and it could proceed. So I wonder if that's a way, Councillor Mayette, to deal with it. What do you think?
I like the way you're thinking.
Okay, you want to make a resolution to that effect, Councillor Mayette?
I make that resolution that we fund this primarily through OCIF or gas tax, and if not, reconsider it in the January meeting for taxation.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Moved, seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? I don't see any. All in favor? That's opposed? That's carried. Okay. Right. Just noticed it's 20 after 12, but we're almost done here, so we'll just carry on. We have the last one, the tree planting on Bruce Road 25. $25,000. Is there discussion for this one? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think one of the items that I got most comments about during the initial construction on Bruce Road 25 was the removal of those beautiful big old trees lining the road on the way down to Gobles Grove area. I think we all know how important trees are to our environment. I think aesthetically, because of the importance of this road as a recreational corridor, the entryway to the Gobles Grove area, I think we do need to put some trees in. And I believe we discussed this last year, I thought, but I can't remember exactly why it wasn't included as part of the budget for this year. I did have a question, maybe for Daniel, because it seemed to me that the resolution is cited here about the NWMO fund and the fact that it is supposed to be dedicated to projects which promote community well-being, which this certainly in my mind does. But there was also another resolution, I believe, from perhaps the mayor and
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Vice Deputy Mayor, I think Huber seconded this, about the fact that I thought the interest for the NWMO money was supposed to be dedicated to tree projects. Does that preclude us from using this funding for just from the principle of the NWMO fund?
So it is correct that there was a previous motion passed that dedicated the interest in the fund towards tree purchases. I believe that the timeline on that motion has lapsed. I think it only extended 2 years through, let's say, 2018, 2019, something along those lines. And that motion didn't preclude any future use of the NWMO reserve. Council is still able to allocate funds from that reserve in any way that they wish.
Okay, well, I would support this. I now that by my calculation, with the hospital donation, that would take us down to a balance of about 269,000 approximately left in the NWMO if this was to be approved. Does that sound right, Daniel?
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really important project.
Just if I could, I'm just a little confused about it because a bunch of trees have been planted there. The Saugeen planted a bunch of trees down the road front on the all the way up to in front of Unifor's parking lot there. They were doing it this fall. I just wonder to the director, I mean, where do these trees go that we're going to pay for here?
Sure. Thank you for the question. We have spent about 15,000 on trees along phase 1 and phase 2 of this road. So this is an additional piece. They would help supplement some in that section, but this would be on the portion that would remain the county road. So from Bruce Street, so the piece that was under construction this year, these would go there. The original conversation was to include these in that contract, do a planting plan and come back, but staff wasn't able to get to that piece in 2021 and add it in. So that's where this goes.
I wondered that, and I do wonder if, I mean, the trees are important. I think everybody agrees with that. I wonder if, I just think it's a county's road. I feel like the county should be responsible, at least to some extent, for planting trees along it. I can understand our having done it on the portion of the road that's going to be ours or going to stay ours, and we've done that, or it has been done. But I feel like the county, it's the county's road, the county's cutting the trees, and the county should come up with some funds to replant those trees or plant some trees along the road. So I just wonder if we should go to the Department of Transportation at the county and with a direct request to say, what are you allocating now or in 2023 or part of 2022, because the project continues in 2022 to plant, the next phase of the project continues in 2022 to plant trees along County Road 25. Or maybe you already have an answer to that, the director.
Sure, thanks. I do. They don't have tree planting in their contracts, and there's no work on Bruce Road 22 or 25 happening in 2022. That the Road 33 realignment has postponed for 1 year, so they're going to be picking that back up in 2023.
Right. So
at that point, we could look to for trees in that area. One of the public comments was about a wind block along Bruce Road 33, but that piece isn't on 25. And so I'm not sure if they're looking at trees at all in the section that was just reconstructed.
Well, I think we should revisit it with the county, and I can certainly do that. You know, so I guess I don't have trouble approving funding right now. I guess I would just rather we didn't spend it right off until we get a little further with the county on it, the deputy mayor. And then
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you on that. Also, we have to look at the Bruce Street extension. Once it comes out on there, do we really want to be putting trees in and then have to remove them once the Bruce Street extension comes in? I'd like to kind of hold off till we get the 2 sections done and then do a nice, as Amanda said, a windbreak and fill in the section then.
Vice Mayor.
Well, I spoke to this last year, and I still think it's sporadic in there. The tree planting that has happened. Yes, we have invested some dollars, but I think that, Mr. Mayor, I'd still like to see these funds approved for County Road 25. A lot of beautiful trees have been removed, and I think tree planting needs to happen. But I think we put that condition on it. I agree with you that we, in the process, though, contact Bruce County to talk about funding for tree planting along the road. But I still like to see this allocated. We can make it conditional on researching county funding, and we can pull back later. If they come in with 25, then fine. But I just think that from an environmental standpoint, I just think that we need to do tree planting on County Road 25 and enhance what's already there, which there has been some, but I think it needs to be additional. So
why don't we, can we do a resolution along these lines that will support funding, will support the $25,000 in funding, and also that we will direct staff to send a letter to Bruce County Council requesting financial support for the planting of trees along Bruce Road 25. It should go to council. Staff, I think, at that level has dealt with it, so it needs to go to the council. Is that if that's agreeable, somebody could make that motion.
Yep.
Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Grace. It's a director. Do you have a comment you want to make?
A question for that letter. Do you, I just heard Vice Deputy Mayor Mayette mention the trees being sporadic. Do you want the letter to request that they consider it for the entire length of Bruce Road 25, or the piece that would retain or remain in Bruce County's control only?
I think for the piece that remains in their control. I think it would be reasonable to request they fund the entire cost of tree planting along the stretch that they own. So that would be my request. I don't hear any objection to that, so I think that's the way we'll go. So the resolution has been moved and seconded, and we'll ask all in favor. That's carried. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the list. Well done, everybody. We'll go back to the treasurer and see if he can let us know what we've done. What have we done, Dan?
Okay, so all motions or just those tax funded?
I want to know I guess I'd like to know what impact we had on the levy.
Okay, so the impact to the levy, there's been $3,500 approved for the Chantry Center. There's been $1,095 approved for the Port Elgin Airport Committee, and there's been an estimated $15,000 approved for Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit, with that final number pending. So with those changes approved, as well as the corrections and items from the previous session that were approved, that would lead to an estimated blended rate of 4.88%, and a municipal rate just over 5%.
Dan, what did we do? How much have we spent from the tax stabilization reserve at this point?
Just the $46,000 for the Lamont Sports Park operational considerations.
So remind me, how much money does it take to adjust the levy by 1%?
So the blended levy is approximately $350,000 for 1%.
So I would suggest to council that we fund enough of the levy from the tax stabilization reserve to bring the blended tax increase to 4.5%. How much would that be, Dan?
Okay. Just a moment. So 133,000.
That's a number? Sorry, I thought you trailed off there. I wasn't sure if you were
133,000.
still figuring. So, okay, so that's the, I'd like to see, I understand that we need a tax increase commensurate to the rate of inflation. And I think that hits us right about there. So, I mean, I'd like to see us apply, something in that range of the tax stabilization reserve to end up at a blended tax increase of 4.5%. That's my thought. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear other comments. Dan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, may I request that if council wishes to give that direction that's specific to the tax rate itself, that it formalize that as a direction on the tax rate rather than a specific amount coming out of tax stabilization reserve, and allow staff the opportunity to make whatever recommendations that get to that percentage.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it, Dan. We can do it that way too. Yep. So anyway, that's where I'm ending up at this, I guess, is what I'm trying to express. And but I'm interested to hear wherever other people end up. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
I was about to ask that question, and Daniel just outlined it, that provide staff with some flexibility to come back to your 4.5 you're recommending for the blended tax rate. I think that's the right way to go, and perhaps tax stabilization fund is, it's not the area to take it from, but let staff have that flexibility. I'm just wondering if is it 386,000, Daniel, is the number that tax stabilization you said earlier in the meeting that we'd like to get to make sure it's not drop below that number, correct?
That's the maximum in our reserve policy. Okay. So, yeah.
Anyways, that's fine. I just think it's good to provide staff with some flexibility to take a look at the number and get to that 4.5, and maybe they can be creative here. So
you're content with the 4.5, Vice Deputy Mayor? That's a good direction to give. All right. Are there other? I think is there consensus around the 4.5 as a number we'd like to arrive at? Councillor Grace is nodding. Is there other general agreement there? Councillor Davinsky is nodding. Councillor Mayette gives a thumbs up. Councillor Smith seems content. The Deputy Mayor. Councillor Carr is remaining. He looks like the Mona Lisa there. He's not super happy, but he's also not screaming. So I can be okay with that. Councillor Carr, you have a comment?
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, anything we can do to save our taxpayers, anything we can after the last few years, we're all obviously aware of the situation going on. We have to look after inflation, and I am aware of that too. I'd like to see it down around 4 if we could. I know that's probably a big ask, and I realize that's a lot of money to do. I'll support what I have to when we go forward here, but myself, I'd like to see us get down close to that 4 if we could. Between our 4% increase there, and we're looking at an 8% water or wastewater and 6% water, we got a fair bit of increases going on here. And, when we do have a municipality with people struggling in it already, that, every little bit helps. So myself, if we can find those savings, as I know staff have come to us with a pretty lean budget as they had, and we're all cognizant of what's going on, but myself, I'd like to see it closer to 4 if we could get it there.
Okay.
I just one comment. I remember discussion last year, and I remember you as mayor saying that let's keep things under control in 2021 and expect, a little heftier increase in 2022. And I asked Daniel before the meeting, last year we were looking at a 2% blended tax rate last year increase and 1.44 municipal residential farm rate change. So, I think last year we came in, we understood we were in a COVID situation and we did keep things under well control in 2021 and at 1.44% municipal contribution. And if you take a look at the budget, what we've discussed the last two meeting dates is there's a whole lot of great things happening in this budget for many, many sectors of the population. So I'm content with the 4.5. I think there's a whole lot of good things happening in this budget.
I think right now, actually, one point you didn't make is that we also cut the commercial rate. Commercial taxes went down in 2021. Which was specifically targeted at COVID-19. And so I think, and we also were very clear, and you're quite right, that couldn't continue and that they would have to go up and probably a little bit more in 2022 to make up for that. Councillor Dubinsky.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Carr. It would be great to see it come down to 4%, but I'll grit my teeth and support the 4.5% increase. And a question through you to Daniel. And Daniel, you and I have already talked about this via email. So what does this mean to an average assessed home, whatever that average happens to be now? What does it mean to their tax bill?
Just give me a moment and I'll pull up that information.
Thank you.
So while Dan does that, why don't we I'd like to give clear direction to staff on the tax rate, because there's a couple of different ideas here. So I just want to make it very clear. So can I get a resolution on where you want to set the tax rate and direct staff to give it to us? So where do you, somebody want to give me direction on 4.5, 4? Do you want to do, need a resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I'll start off the conversation if you wish. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Carr has the floor. Councillor Carr.
It's okay. I would make the motion that town staff come back with a budget aiming for a 4% increase blended rate.
So that's moved by Councillor Carr. Is there a seconder for that? Said seconded by the deputy mayor. Is there discussion around that?
Mr. Mayor, what would we need to find through Daniel, another number to look up, but to get to 4%, what's the amount again? We would need to go back and go through this budget one more time.
So on the blended rate, we'd be looking at to move it to 4% would be close to $300,000, $280,000, $300,000. And I'll remind council of my comments prior to the additional items where I spoke of core operating expenses and capital expenses, and how this budget does already have some subsidization through the future capital reserve, which presents, then a challenge for the 2023 budgeting process. So that would be my response on that.
Sure. All right. Any further discussion on the motion, the 4% motion, Councillor Mayette?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there enough funds in the tax stabilization reserve to make that happen? And if there is, what would be the impact of finding, is there $350,000 left in this tax stabilization reserve?
There's two ways to look at it. The tax stabilization reserve, if our 2021 general surplus does come in at the level that staff are projecting, which is 400,000 or more, then our tax stabilization would be replenished to a minimum of 386,000, and we could potentially replenish it even more in order to fund the transfer out of that reserve in 2022. So assuming that the general surplus comes in at the level that staff are expecting, then yes. And the alternative is also that because we already have subsidization coming out of the future capital reserve, and there is still approximately 1.4 or 1.5 million there, that the funds could come out of there as well, if council chose to again subsidize the operating spending in that way.
So it somewhat, what I heard you say was it somewhat depends on the amount of supplemental or surplus taxation that we will be bringing in from 2021.
That's correct.
And last year, if my recollection is correct, we had about 480,000 in supplemental taxation unaccounted for. Is that correct?
So the general surplus related to supplemental taxation in 2021 is only 260,000, but there's also labor vacancies in other areas that generate maybe a bit of a surplus.
Okay.
All right, so subsequently, I would support the motion based on that we could afford it with the tax stabilization reserve and the sorry, Daniel, the other reserve, the future capital reserve.
Correct.
So I think, I mean, there's no question the municipality has the money to do it. We have the reserves to do it. The question is, what impact does that have in future years? You have to be cautious how close you cut to the bone, because if we don't have the, we're not in the position next year with tax stabilization. If, for example, a big chunk of tax stabilization this year was funded through gapping and employee gapping, right, where we had several directors not working for us for months on end, and that led to savings. That's a type of savings you hope you don't experience year over year. You want to be have directors in place and be paying them, right? So it's fluctuating amount of money, and there's a risk that if you cut that reserve too closely, that you will in the next year have to make up for it with pure taxation. You just don't have the cash. So so I think for my liking, 4% cuts too close to the bone. I understand the impetus to go down that far. It would be nice to be lower, but I don't think we can. I think we run the risk of setting up council in 2023 with starting off with a huge hole that they have to dig out of before they can even fund their 2023 operating and capital. So I think taking $300,000 out of this budget is taking too much. So I won't support the resolution at 4%. Those are my views. Other thoughts before we call the question on the resolution? Councillor Davinsky.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I must admit, I tend to agree. When I was given the opportunity of this appointment to council and I made my presentation, I stated then that inflation would be about 4.5% and we would have to deal with that. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. Love to have the 4% as suggested by Councillor Carr, but I think 4.5 is a tad more realistic. Won't be popular, but a tad more realistic. Thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would Councillor Carr be willing to split the difference, 4.25?
I think we have the resolution. Let's consider the resolution. I don't want to horse trade on the resolution. We can consider this one, then we can consider another one. If it passes, we won't, but if it doesn't, we'll consider something else. Okay. We'll just be a little more straightforward way to deal with it. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I guess when we're talking about this, when we're trying to hit that 4%, is there stuff, I know we've already gone through, so I'm going to pick on fleet here, and the one that comes to mind, if I'm talking $300,000 right now, is a tub grinder. I obviously see the need that, I guess, Public Works is saying we need this. It's going to make it more efficient. We're going to have better turnover. The fill is going to be better, to cover the garbage at the dump. But, once again, myself, I would like to still see that 4%, and could we look at something like that? I know that probably won't go over real well, but, that is a $300 savings right off the get-go of a capital purchase that we haven't had before, that in turn, I guess, would be put into operations. There'll be other expenses that will be incurred with that as it goes along. But just my 2 cents on that one, that would be a $300,000 savings there if we were to start going back and looking at other stuff. I don't know if that's okay to look at it that way, but that would be my 2
It would be
cents?
fine, but it's funded from development charges. So
Oh,
it
okay,
doesn't
sorry.
help us on the tax levy.
Okay, never mind then.
So we have the resolution on the floor. Councillor Carr and the deputy mayor, am I right? Moved the, I can't remember, or somebody moved, it's been moved and seconded anyway, that we direct staff to return the budget at 4%. We've had a discussion on it, so I'll ask all in favor. Opposed? That's defeated. Can we get some motion to give direction then at another number? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would move to give staff direction to come back with a 4.5% blended tax rate goal.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on that one? The treasurer.
Can I just want to again caution or remind council that when we speak of the blended rate, it does involve the county and education rates. And so if the motion is approved and our assumptions about the county and education rate are correct, then we'll be able to come back in January with a proposal that hopefully won't catch anyone off guard. But if the county or education rates did differ a lot from our assumptions, then there may be new information or a surprise at that January meeting.
Yep, I think council understands that and we can deal with it when the time comes. Councillor Mayette.
Thanks for that, Daniel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks for that, Daniel. And that does not preclude us then from making adjustments in January, right?
No.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Councillor Davinsky.
Okay, I'm back to my question of the day, and I don't know if Daniel's had a chance through you, Mr. Mayor, to figure this out. Based on a home assessed at whatever, and I thought it was 350,000 last year. What is the tax increase for a home assessed at the average assessed rate?
The average assessment that I use for these purposes as the typical residential property through MPAC this year came in at 343,000 of average assessment, and that represents, in terms of market value, that could be a $600,000 home or even a $700,000 home, and the average impact of that of a 4.5% blended increase would be $185, with approximately $86 of that being the municipal portion. So approximately $99 of that would be the county and education portions.
Okay, so that's $185, did you say? And that's the blended tax rate on an average assessed home of 343,000. Did I get that correct, Daniel?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a good point to reiterate that about $100 of that we don't have any control over. Only about $86 of it is our levy. So you've heard the resolution. Any other discussion? I don't see any. All in favor then? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. So I believe that we have decided on everything we have to decide on, given direction on what we need to give direction on. You do then have item 12, the 2022 business plan recap and police summary. You've heard about all that already throughout the content of the budget, so I don't think we need to revisit that. If there's nothing further, then we'll move. Our next budget meeting will be on December the 7th, 2021. Well, that's today, so that's not right. When will we revisit the budget? Now, then that would be a good question. We're anticipating in January, Daniel.
I would anticipate it's staff's intent to have at the first meeting in January, barring anything unforeseen, or potentially the second meeting in January at the absolute latest.
All right, very good. So then with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Carr. All in favor? The committee stands adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. See you.